Emily Harper's screams, recorded on CCTV, were the last evidence of her presence in the luxurious villa on Palm Jumeirah. Later, in the bedroom of this villa, gifted to her by Sheikh Khaled al-Mansouri, the police would discover steel rings embedded in the walls. This story did not receive widespread coverage in the world press, remaining in the shadow of more high-profile events and delicately hushed up by influential figures. It began not with violence, but with the embodiment of a fairy tale that Emily Harper, a 27-year-old blogger from Chicago, broadcast to an audience of nearly 2 million followers. Her content was the quintessential dream of a luxurious life, traveling to exotic corners of the planet, wearing couture outfits, and enjoying impeccable breakfasts overlooking the ocean. In 2022, Emily moved to Dubai, a city that is itself a giant backdrop for such a lifestyle. She was ambitious, had a knack for business, and knew exactly what her audience wanted. Emily's friend, Jessica Knight, would later tell investigators that Emily saw Dubai not just as a new place to live, but as a launching pad to a whole new level. She wanted to become part of the world she had previously only advertised. And that world opened its doors to her at a charity auction at the Burj Al Arab Hotel in November 2022. It was there that she met Khaled al-Mansouri. He was 39 years old, came from an influential, though not ruling, family, and had a reputation as a shrewd investor with impeccable manners and a European education. He did not flaunt his wealth, but it was evident in every detail, in his tailor-made suit, his limited edition watch, and the calm confidence with which he bid on works of art. Their romance developed rapidly, and Emily willingly shared its progress with her followers. The first few months of their relationship turned into a continuous kaleidoscope of luxury. A private jet flight to the Seychelles, a weekend at the Formula One Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi, and dinner at an underwater restaurant. Khaled showered her with gifts, each of which became the subject of a separate post or video. The diamond necklace he gave her for Christmas received over 100,000 likes. A pearl-colored Bentley followed this. The climax was a villa on the Palm Jumeirah, an artificial island that symbolizes Dubai's luxury. The documents for the villa, worth several $1 million, were registered in Emily's name. According to Jessica Knight, this gesture finally convinced Emily of Khaled's serious intentions. She believed she had found not just a sponsor, but her future husband. However, against the backdrop of this public idol, the first warning signs began to appear, which at the time seemed insignificant. Jessica Knight, who lives in Los Angeles, kept in touch with Emily almost daily via video calls. Around March 2023, she began to notice changes. The video calls became less frequent. Emily increasingly responded with short text messages, citing busyness or poor connection. When they did manage to talk, Emily, according to Jessica, looked tired and spoke more quietly than usual. Several times during the conversation, she glanced to the side, as if afraid of being overheard. Khaled was always invisibly present. Whereas Emily had previously talked freely about her plans, ideas for her blog, and meetings, her stories had now become more measured, almost formal. She described their dinners together, gifts and trips, but the spontaneity had disappeared from her speech. The content of her blog also changed. Her own thoughts, reflections, and personal stories gradually vanished from it. The posts became shorter, turning into glossy reports about gifts received and events attended. Followers, accustomed to her lively communication, began to leave comments asking if she was okay, but these comments were left unanswered or deleted. In April, Emily was supposed to fly to Chicago for her mother's birthday. The trip had been planned for several months. A week before departure, she sent her mother a brief message stating that she would be unable to come because Khaled had urgent business plans that required her presence. This was entirely out of character for Emily, who had always been very close to her family. When her mother tried to call her to discuss it, Emily didn't answer the phone and later sent a message saying, Can't talk. Khaled has an important meeting. Love you. It was then that her family and close friends became seriously concerned for the first time. They saw the facade of a perfect life, but intuitively felt that something was going on behind it. Jessica Knight attempted to speak directly to Emily. During one of their rare video calls in May, she asked her friend if she felt isolated. Emily froze for a moment, her smile disappearing. According to Jessica, she saw fear in her friend's eyes, but a second later, Emily smiled tensely again and assured her that she was happier than ever, and that Khaled was just very caring and wanted her to be around all the time. This conversation was the last time Jessica saw her friend's face. After that, their communication was reduced to rare, monosyllabic text messages, which, as the investigation would later suggest, may not have been written by Emily herself. The golden cage that Emily had enthusiastically shown to the world began to close, quietly. By the beginning of the summer of 2023, Emily Harper had virtually disappeared from the digital space that was her profession and habitat. Her last Instagram post, dated May 28th, was a professionally taken photo of her and Khaled aboard a yacht against the backdrop of the sunset over the Persian Gulf. The caption was laconic and did not contain Emily's usual personal emotions. Another magical evening. Then there was silence. Millions of followers, accustomed to daily updates, initially left concerned comments. But over time, their activity gave way to speculation and rumors. For her family and close friends, however, this digital silence was deafening. Jessica Knight tried to contact her dozens of times. Calls were dropped after the first ring. Messages on instant messengers were met with monosyllabic, delayed responses devoid of any personality. The style of these messages was strikingly different from Emily's writing. They lacked the emojis, abbreviations, and colloquialisms she always used. Instead of mom, she wrote mum to her mother, and instead of all good, she wrote I'm fine. One of the messages sent to her sister in mid-June contained a grammatical error that Emily, a journalism graduate, would never have made. The family clung to the hope that these were signs of deep depression or the result of total control by Khaled, who could have dictated the texts to her. The thought of physical harm seemed unthinkable. The turning point came on June 29th, Emily's birthday. Family and friends sent her birthday wishes from early in the morning. There was no response, not a single post, not a single story, not a single reply. It was absolutely unthinkable. Emily loved her birthday and always celebrated it in style, sharing every moment with her audience. By the evening of that day, her mother, Catherine Harper, had had a panic attack and decided to take action. Her first call was to Khaled al-Mansouri. He did not answer immediately, calling back a few hours later. According to Catherine, his voice sounded calm and even sympathetic. He said that Emily had decided to take a digital detox and had gone to a secluded place in the mountains of Oman for a few weeks to meditate. When asked why she hadn't told her family, Khaled replied that it was her wish to disconnect from the outside world, to reboot completely. He assured Catherine that Emily was fine, that she was just tired of being in the public eye. This explanation did not reassure the family, but only heightened their suspicions. Emily had never been interested in meditation or sought solitude. On July 1st, Catherine Harper contacted the U.S. consulate in Dubai and reported her daughter missing. The diplomats took her request seriously, but acted within the bounds of protocol. They sent an official request to the Dubai police, asking them to investigate the whereabouts of U.S. citizen Emily Harper. The initial response from law enforcement was cautious. To them, it appeared to be a domestic dispute. A young woman living with a wealthy partner had stopped communicating. Such cases were not uncommon. The officer on duty at the Al Barsha District Police Station, where the request was received, contacted Khaled al-Mansouri by phone. The Sheikh repeated his version of Emily's trip to Oman, expressing slight irritation at being bothered about such a trivial matter. He promised to ask Emily to contact her mother as soon as she returned to an area with network coverage. That was enough for the police at the time. The case was not pursued further. However, Jessica Knight and Emily's other friends decided to take matters into their own hands. On July 7th, they launched a social media campaign with the hashtag #FindEmilyHarper. They posted her latest photos, screenshots of strange messages, and urged her followers to help spread the word. The campaign quickly gained momentum. The story of the mysterious disappearance of a popular blogger living in luxury with an influential sheikh went viral. Major American and British tabloids picked up the story. The pressure mounted. The U.S. consulate, having received new information from the family and faced with public outcry, sent a second, more insistent request to the Dubai police. This time, the case was given an official number. 2 detectives were sent to Khaled al-Mansouri's villa on Palm Jumeirah to conduct an interview. This happened on July 12th. Khaled met them in person. He was dressed in traditional Arab clothing, behaved impeccably, and invited the police into the living room, furnished with minimalist luxury. He calmly and confidently presented his version of events, which had now changed somewhat. According to him, he and Emily had argued at the end of May. She was unhappy with his constant work commitments and decided to go to her mother's house in Chicago for a while to think things over. When asked why he had previously mentioned a trip to Oman, Khaled replied that he did not want to air their dirty laundry in public and upset her mother with the details of their personal differences. To back up his words, he showed the police correspondence on Emily's phone, which, according to him, she had left at home, taking another one with her. The messages included a text allegedly sent by Emily to her mother, in which she said she would be home soon. The detectives asked to search the house. Khaled agreed without objection, showing them around all the rooms. The villa was in perfect order. There were no signs of a struggle or anything suspicious. However, one of the detectives noticed that the main bedroom was unusually dark despite its huge panoramic windows. The thick curtains were drawn. When asked to open them, Khaled replied that the electric mechanism was broken. The visit ended without any results. In their preliminary report, the detectives stated that they had found no grounds for initiating a criminal case, but recommended continuing the investigation due to contradictions in al-Mansouri's testimony. Meanwhile, the Harper family, having received information from Jessica about Khaled's new version, immediately informed the consulate that Emily had not appeared in Chicago and could not have appeared, since her main passport was in a bank safe deposit box in Dubai, and the duplicate, according to their information, was kept in a safe at the villa. This discrepancy became the key moment that prompted the investigation to take more decisive action. Under pressure from diplomats and amid ongoing media hype, the Dubai prosecutor's office issued a warrant for a full search of the villa and the seizure of all electronic media. Early in the morning on July 15, 2023, several unmarked cars pulled up to the gates of the villa on Palm Jumeirah. The task force, consisting of detectives, forensic experts, and a cybersecurity specialist, presented the search warrant to the stunned security guard. Khaled al-Mansouri, who had been notified of the visit in advance, was waiting for them in the lobby. His behavior was strikingly different from what he had shown during the previous meeting. The ostentatious politeness was gone, replaced by cold, barely concealed contempt. He did not utter a word of greeting, silently watching as the group of 8 people in gloves and shoe covers spread out through his immaculate home. The search began with a methodical inspection of the common areas. Forensic experts carefully examined surfaces for hidden traces, checked bathroom drains, and inspected the contents of trash cans. At the same time, an IT specialist connected to the home security system server. The initial inspection did not yield any immediate results. The house was sterile, almost impersonal, like a luxury hotel room. There were no signs of 2 people living there permanently, no random photos, personal trinkets, or scattered magazines. This created an impression of artificiality that was oppressive. The investigation focused on two key areas: the main bedroom and Khaled's study. When the detectives entered the bedroom, they were again confronted with the same unnatural darkness as on their first visit. The thick curtains were drawn. Ignoring Khaled's protesting gaze, the senior detective approached the window and forcefully pulled the heavy fabric aside by hand. Bright sunlight flooded the room, and it was then that details previously hidden by the dim light became visible. On three walls of the bedroom, about 1.5 meters above the floor, 4 steel rings were found, firmly embedded in the concrete base. The metal was polished, but at the base of 2 of them, forensic experts noticed microscopic scratches and signs of wear invisible to the naked eye. This discovery was strange in itself, but did not yet prove the criminal nature of the events. Khaled's lawyers would later insist that these were elements for fitness activities or specific consensual sexual practices. However, subsequent discoveries rendered this version obsolete. Using a special scanner that penetrates walls, forensic experts determined that an additional layer of soundproofing material had been installed behind decorative panels made of expensive wood around the entire perimeter of the room. This modification wasn't included in the original design of the villa, and judging by the condition of the fasteners, it had been made relatively recently. At the same time, the team working in the study discovered a safe mounted in the wall behind a painting by a contemporary artist. When asked by the detectives to provide the code, Khaled al-Mansouri responded with silence, glancing briefly at his lawyer, who had already arrived at the villa by that point. It was decided to open the safe on the spot. The specialist who was called in worked for about an hour. When the heavy door of the safe finally gave way, its contents caused even the experienced detectives to fall silent for a moment. Inside, neatly stacked, lay several items. On top was a duplicate of Emily Harper's passport, issued in her name by the U.S. consulate, which finally refuted Khaled's version of her leaving for Chicago on her own. Next to it lay several pieces of jewelry, which her mother would later identify as gifts from Emily. But the main find was what lay at the bottom of the safe. It was an evening gown from a famous French fashion house, the very one Emily had posed in for a photo posted on her blog in early May. The fabric around the chest and stomach was covered with numerous dark spots, which, according to preliminary estimates, were traces of blood. The dress was rolled up to hide these spots. The discovery of the missing person's blood-stained clothing, combined with the strange modifications in the bedroom, gave investigators sufficient grounds for immediate arrest. As the forensic investigator, wearing gloves, carefully removed the dress from the safe, the IT specialist working with the video surveillance server made another discovery. He informed the senior detective that there was an undeleted fragment of a recording on the system's hard drive, dated May 30th, 2023. The fragment was short, only a few minutes long, and came from a camera located in the second-floor hallway leading to the main bedroom. The video was static, showing only the closed bedroom door. However, the audio track was active. The recording was not listened to on site. The file was copied for further study in the laboratory. But the very fact that such a recording existed from the night after which Emily stopped appearing in public was critically important. Based on the evidence found, the senior detective informed Khaled al-Mansouri that he was being detained on suspicion of involvement in the disappearance and possible murder of Emily Harper. Khaled showed no emotion. His face remained impassive as the police officer read him his rights. He only silently held out his hands for the handcuffs. The scene of his arrest was surreal. An influential investor in expensive clothes accompanied by police, leaving his luxurious villa against the backdrop of the sparkling waters of the Persian Gulf. The golden cage he had built for Emily had now closed behind him. Khaled al-Mansouri's arrest prompted an immediate and powerful reaction from his family. Within hours, he was assigned a team of Dubai's top lawyers, renowned for their expertise in handling sensitive cases involving the interests of the elite. The initial interrogations, conducted in the presence of lawyers, yielded no results for the investigation. Khalid al-Mansouri behaved in a completely calm manner, maintaining his distance and responding to all questions with either silence or prepared phrases. He completely denied any involvement in the disappearance of Emily Harper. His official position, as stated by his lawyers, was that all the evidence found in the house either had an innocent explanation or had been planted to discredit him. The steel rings in the bedroom, he said, were part of their sex life, based on BDSM practices, in which Emily, he claimed, participated willingly and actively. He explained the blood-stained dress as an accident that happened a few weeks before she left. Emily allegedly had a nosebleed after a wild party and stained her outfit. He claimed that he did not throw away the expensive dress, but put it in a safe to take it to the dry cleaners later. He changed his story about her departure again, now claiming that she had left him after an argument without saying where she was going. He suggested that she might have contacted one of her many admirers and left with him. This line of defense was intended to portray Emily as a woman of unstable behavior and questionable morals, and Khalid himself as a victim of her whims and subsequent false accusations. While the lawyers were building their defense, the Dubai police forensic laboratories were working feverishly. The evidence they found spoke for itself in a much more convincing language. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood on the dress undoubtedly belonged to Emily Harper. Moreover, forensic experts, after studying the nature and location of the stains, concluded that a simple nosebleed could not have caused them. Extensive soaking of the fabric and splatters of a specific shape indicated a penetrating wound to the chest or abdomen. Microparticles of metal were also found in the fibers of the dress, identical in composition to the material of the rings embedded in the bedroom wall. Microscopic examination of the rings themselves and the adjacent wall surface revealed several fibers from the dress and a single human hair about 30 centimeters long. Genetic testing confirmed that the hair belonged to Emily. Its root bulb showed signs of having been pulled out with considerable force. But the most damning piece of evidence was the audio file from the surveillance camera. The recording was played in a specially equipped room in the presence of the lead investigator and a representative from the prosecutor's office. The audio file, which is 4 minutes and 17 seconds long, contains an audio track recorded on the night of May 30th. At first, a muffled male voice could be heard speaking in a raised tone in English with an Arabic accent. The words were indistinct, but the intonation was clearly aggressive. Then, a female voice was heard, which phonoscopy experts identified as belonging to Emily Harper. She uttered fragmented phrases in which the words, "please don't," and "stop" could be made out. After that, her voice turned into screams. These were not just cries of pain or anger, but cries of terror from an animal. They lasted about 30 seconds, then abruptly stopped. The last 2 minutes of the recording were utterly silent. This audio recording essentially became a document of Emily's last minutes of active resistance. It destroyed the defense's version of consensual BDSM practices and a domestic quarrel. Despite the presence of such compelling evidence, the prosecution faced a serious legal problem. Emily Harper's body had never been found. The absence of the victim's body is one of the most challenging circumstances in murder cases. Khalid al-Mansouri's defense immediately seized on this. The lawyers filed a motion to release their client on bail, arguing that the state had not provided any evidence of Emily Harper's death. They insisted that she was alive and in hiding, and that all the evidence presented was circumstantial and could be interpreted in different ways. A large-scale campaign to shape public opinion began. Articles began to appear in the media controlled by the al-Mansouri family, hinting at Emily's promiscuous lifestyle, her relationships with other men, and her financial problems. Her image was transformed from that of a victim to that of an adventuress who had framed her wealthy patron and staged her own disappearance. The prosecution, however, took a tough stance. Based on a combination of evidence, the results of the dress examination, signs of a struggle in the bedroom, and, most importantly, the chilling audio recording on July 25, 2023. Khaled Al-Mansouri was formally charged with the premeditated murder of Emily Harper. The court denied his request for bail, stating that he was a flight risk and could interfere with the investigation. The case went to trial. The entire legal world of Dubai held its breath in anticipation of a trial that promised to be unprecedented. The trial of a member of an influential family on charges of murder in the absence of the main piece of evidence, the victim's body. The trial of Khaled Al-Mansouri began in October 2023 and was held behind closed doors, a common practice for cases involving the reputations of influential families in the UAE. Restricted press access meant that details of the hearings were only leaked in the form of rumors and brief comments from lawyers. The prosecution, led by one of Dubai's most experienced prosecutors, based its case not on direct evidence, but on a so-called chain of circumstantial evidence, each piece of which, in their opinion, was inextricably linked to the other. The first witnesses called were Emily Harper's mother, sister, and friend Jessica Knight. Via video link from the US, they told the court about Emily's personality, her character, her plans for the future, and the disturbing changes they had observed in the last months of her life. Their testimony was intended to counter the defense's portrayal of Emily as an unstable adventuress and to present her as a determined young woman who had fallen into a situation of total control and isolation. Then it was the turn of the forensic experts. One after another, they presented the results of their investigations to the court. A DNA analysis specialist confirmed that the blood on the dress was a 100% match with Emily's genetic material. A forensic expert concluded that the nature of the injury that led to such bleeding was highly likely to be incompatible with life. The engineer who examined the bedroom presented a detailed report on the additional soundproofing, which, in his estimation, had been installed no earlier than 2 months before the girl's disappearance. The climax of the prosecution's presentation was the demonstration of an audio recording. In the complete silence of the courtroom, the sounds documenting the last moments of Emily's struggle were heard. According to the transcript, while listening to the recording, Emily's mother, who was watching the proceedings via video link, lost consciousness. Khaled Al-Mansouri, who had previously maintained a stony expression, showed signs of agitation for the first time. According to eyewitnesses, he clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The defense acted aggressively and methodically, attempting to identify a weak link in each part of the prosecution's chain. The lawyers questioned the integrity of the evidence collection, hinting at the possibility of its falsification. They called their own expert witness, who stated that the interpretation of the bloodstains could be ambiguous. They presented the court with the testimony of 2 European witnesses who claimed to have seen a woman resembling Emily Harper at Dubai Airport in early June. However, during cross-examination, the prosecutor easily refuted their testimony, pointing out serious discrepancies in their descriptions of her appearance and the fact that both witnesses had previously had business dealings with one of the companies owned by the Al-Mansouri family. The primary and unchanging trump card of the defense remained the absence of a body. How can you try someone for murder if there is no evidence that the alleged victim is dead? The lead attorney asked rhetorically in his closing statement. She could have left, gone into hiding, started a new life. The prosecution is building its case on a house of cards, not on a rock of facts. Parallel to the trial, the police conducted one of the most significant search operations in Dubai's history. Investigators analyzed data from hundreds of surveillance cameras and tracked the movements of Khaled's cars between May 30th and June 5th. Particular attention was paid to his night trip on May 31st, when his vehicle left the city and headed towards the Rub al-Khali desert. For several weeks, special teams with dogs and equipment for deep soil scanning combed through hundreds of square kilometers of lifeless desert. Divers were brought in to search the coastal waters near Palm Jumeirah, but all efforts were in vain. Emily Harper's body was never found. On January 21, 2024, after 3 months of hearings, the court retired to deliver its verdict. The decision was announced 2 days later. The panel of judges found Khaled al-Mansouri guilty of the premeditated murder of Emily Harper. In explaining the verdict, the judge stated that, despite the absence of a body, the body of circumstantial evidence presented was complete, irrefutable, and left no reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. The audio recording was recognized as key evidence documenting the act of violence that led to death. Khaled al-Mansouri was sentenced to life imprisonment. His family subsequently filed numerous appeals, but higher courts rejected all. He is serving his sentence in Dubai Central Prison. This case became a landmark for the UAE legal system, setting a precedent for a murder conviction based solely on circumstantial evidence. It served as a quiet but powerful reminder that tragedies can lurk behind the dazzling facade of luxury, and that digital traces and forensic science can give victims a voice even after they are gone. Emily Harper's family was never able to bury their daughter. The desert that swallowed her body keeps its secret, leaving only the dry facts of the criminal case and a chilling audio recording as the only memorial to a life cut short. A 19-year-old student from Kazan came to Dubai for an intellectual competition, and 5 weeks later, she was found in a glass aquarium with her skin peeled off her legs and her eyes gouged out. What happened to Sabina Rakhimova remains a mystery that the authorities of the United Arab Emirates prefer not to disclose. It all began in the spring of 2023 when Sabina Rakhimova received an email at her university address. The girl was a fourth-year student at the Faculty of International Relations at Kazan Federal University and was planning a career as a diplomat. The email came from an organization called Future Muslim Women, an international educational project that supposedly sought talented girls from Islamic countries to participate in a conference in Dubai. The sender introduced himself as the project coordinator, Amir Hassan, and said that Sabina had passed the preliminary selection based on her academic achievements and an essay on the role of women in the modern Islamic world, which she had published in a student magazine. The letter contained an invitation to a 3-day conference with all expenses paid, including airfare, accommodation in a 5-star hotel, and per diem. The event was to be held under the patronage of Sheikh Talal Al Nahyan, a member of the ruling family of Abu Dhabi. Sabina was thrilled. During her 3 years of study, she had established herself as one of the best students in her class, was fluent in English and Arabic, and actively participated in United Nations model conferences. The opportunity to take part in an international event of this level seemed like an incredible stroke of luck and an important step for her future career. Sabina's parents, Rashid and Aliya Rakhimov, were somewhat apprehensive about the trip. Her father worked as an engineer at a chemical plant in Nizhnekamsk, and her mother taught the Tatar language at school. The family lived modestly, and such opportunities seemed too good to be true. Rashid even offered to accompany his daughter, but the organizers explained that the program was strictly for individual participation. Sabina spent 2 weeks preparing a presentation on the prospects for women's education in Central Asia. She studied the biographies of the other participants listed on the project website: girls from Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and other countries in the Islamic world. They all looked like educated and ambitious young women between the ages of 18 and 25. A week before departure, Amir Hassan sent Sabina a detailed program of events. The first day included registration of participants and an evening reception at the Opus Hotel in Business Bay, one of the most prestigious areas of Dubai. The second day was devoted to panel discussions on women's leadership in Islam, entrepreneurship, and social initiatives. The third day included a cultural program and the closing of the conference with the presentation of certificates. On June 8, 2023, Sabina flew from Kazan to Dubai via Moscow. On the plane, She took several selfies and posted them on social media with a caption saying that she was flying to an international conference and was very excited. Her last Instagram post was made at Dubai Airport, a photo of the arrivals hall with an emoji of the United Arab Emirates flag and a heart. At the airport, she was met by a driver holding a sign with her name written in Latin letters. The man introduced himself as Ahmed and said he would take her to the hotel. On the way, he explained that the other participants had already arrived and that tomorrow morning everyone would meet for breakfast to get acquainted and receive the program of events. The Opus Hotel was truly impressive. The unusually shaped building, designed by renowned architect Zaha Hadid, was located in the heart of the business district. Sabina's room was on the 22nd floor with a panoramic view of the Dubai skyline. The girl was amazed by the luxury of the interior and immediately took a video for her subscribers, saying that she had never lived in such conditions before. That evening, Sabina went down to the hotel restaurant, where a welcome dinner was to be held. In the lobby, she was met by a middle-aged woman in a strict business suit who introduced herself as Fatima Al-Zahra, the project coordinator. She explained that the other participants had already gathered in a private room and that Sabina was a little late due to a flight delay. Fatima escorted Sabina to the elevator, which went up to the 38th floor, where the hotel's VIP rooms were located. About 15 young women were sitting in the spacious room with huge windows overlooking the city. All were dressed in elegant but conservative outfits, and most wore hijabs of various colors. The atmosphere seemed friendly and relaxed. Sabina was introduced to the other participants. Among them were Aisha from Pakistan, who was studying international law, Noor from Indonesia with a degree in economics, and Layla from Morocco, who specialized in Islamic philosophy. All the girls spoke good English and gave the impression of being educated and ambitious young women. Dinner took place in a relaxed atmosphere. The participants discussed their projects, shared their plans for the future, and talked about their countries. Sabina felt a little awkward because of the language barrier. Her English was good for academic purposes, but in an informal setting, she sometimes struggled to find the right words. Nevertheless, the other girls were friendly and patient. Around 10 p.m., Fatima announced that the program would start early the next day, so everyone should get a good night's rest. She handed out bags with conference materials, including the schedule, maps of Dubai, and souvenirs with the project logo. Sabina returned to her room in high spirits and sent her parents a message saying that everything was going well and that the other participants were very interesting. On the morning of June 9th, Sabina woke up early and immediately checked the schedule. The first session was to begin at 10 a.m. in the hotel conference room. The topic was announced as Women's Leadership in the Modern Islamic World. Sabina prepared thoroughly, memorizing the key points of her presentation on the situation with women's education in Tatarstan and Central Asia. However, when she went down for breakfast, none of the participants she had met the day before were in the restaurant. The reception desk explained that the program had been changed at the last minute, and that the new schedule would be brought to her room. Sabina felt uneasy, but decided that such changes in the programs of international events were commonplace. Around noon, there was a knock on her door. Standing outside were two men in suits who introduced themselves as hotel security guards. They explained that there had been an incident with the hotel's security system and that all guests were being asked to temporarily hand over their mobile phones and laptops for inspection. The men were polite but insistent, and Sabina, not wanting to cause any trouble, handed over her devices. After that, all contact with the outside world was cut off. Sabina's parents began to worry the next day when their daughter did not respond to their messages. Rashid Rakimov tried to call the hotel, but was told that no guest with that name was registered there. When he gave the room number that Sabina had mentioned in their last conversation, he was told that the room was occupied by another guest. The worried family contacted the Kazan police, but they explained that the girl was abroad of her own free will and that they could only start a search in a few days. Rashid Rakimov contacted the consular section of the Russian embassy in Abu Dhabi, but they were also unable to find any traces of Sabina's stay in the country. Meanwhile, the conference organizers continued to assure all concerned relatives of the participants that the girls were on a special retreat without access to the internet or telephone communication. Amir Hassan explained in an email that this was part of a spiritual development program personally designed by Sheikh Talal, and that the participants would return to normal in a few weeks. This explanation might have reassured the parents, were it not for one detail. On June 14th, 6 days after her daughter's disappearance, Aliya Rakimova received a short message from Sabina's number. It contained just a few words in Tatar. Anne, Mina Yaksi. Kaitu, Mom, I'm fine. I'll be back. The message arrived at 4 a.m. Moscow time, which was 5 a.m. in Dubai. The mother immediately realized that the message was not written by her daughter. Sabina never wrote to her parents in Tatar in messages. Everyone in the family communicated in Russian, and Tatar was only used in conversation. In addition, the girl always called her mother Mom and not Anne, a more formal address that she would only use with older strangers. Rashid Rakimov immediately forwarded the message to the Russian consulate, insisting that his daughter was in danger. The consul promised to submit an official request to the local authorities regarding the whereabouts of the Russian citizen. However, the Dubai police replied that they had no information about Sabina Rakimova's stay in the Emirates. Days passed, and no information about the girl's fate was received. Her parents turned to journalists, social media, and human rights organizations. The story began to receive attention in the Russian media, especially in Tatarstan. However, all attempts to obtain an official response from the authorities of the United Arab Emirates were met with silence. On June 28th, 20 days after his daughter's disappearance, Rashid Rakimov decided to fly to Dubai himself. He took time off work and borrowed money from relatives for tickets and a visa. At the Dubai airport, he was met by an employee of the Russian consulate who accompanied him to the police station to file an official missing person report. The police officer who took the report behaved formally and disinterestedly. He recorded the basic information about Sabina, but when Rashid began to describe the circumstances of her disappearance, the officer interrupted him, saying that many young tourists disappear in Dubai for a few days and then reappear in other emirates or neighboring countries. He advised Rashid to wait another week before panicking. Rashid spent 5 days in Dubai, visiting hospitals, morgues, hotels, and travel agencies. No one knew anything about his daughter. The Opus Hotel confirmed that a private event had indeed taken place there on the dates specified, but the details were a trade secret, and the administration could not disclose them without a court order. On July 5th, Rashid Rakimov returned to Kazan empty-handed, but he did not give up. He created a group on social media where he posted photos of his daughter and asked anyone who might have seen her in Dubai to come forward. Parents of other conference participants from different countries joined the group. It turned out that at least 8 families had lost contact with their daughters at around the same time. Nur Sari's mother from Jakarta was particularly active, coordinating efforts between the families of the missing girls. Through her, Rashid learned that parents from Pakistan, Morocco, and Egypt had faced exactly the same situation. Their daughters had disappeared after participating in the same project, and the organizers had given the same explanations about a spiritual retreat. On July 13th, the first breakthrough in the case occurred. A food delivery service employee in Dubai named Karim Al-Mahdi contacted the Indonesian consulate with a statement that he had seen girls matching the description of the missing conference participants. According to him, he regularly delivered orders to a villa in the prestigious Jumeirah area, where he saw a group of young women who looked depressed and frightened. Karim said that during one of his deliveries, 2 girls of Asian appearance approached him and asked for help. They spoke English with an Indonesian accent and claimed that they were being held against their will. One of them slipped him a note, asking him to pass on a message to the Indonesian consulate. The note contained the name Nur Sari and her mother's phone number in Jakarta. Karim's information led Indonesian diplomats to submit an official request to the Dubai authorities to check the address. However, when the police arrived at the villa, no one was there. The owner of the property said he had rented the house to a tourist group that had already left the country. Nevertheless, this was the first concrete lead. Karim agreed to give detailed testimony and described the situation at the villa. According to him, the windows of most rooms were covered with thick curtains even during the day, and security guards were constantly on duty in the courtyard. He also noted that the girls he saw were wearing identical clothes, long white dresses and headscarves, which he found strange for tourists. On July 17th, the story took an unexpected turn. An anonymous account appeared on social media, which began publishing photos and documents related to the Future Muslim Women Project. Among the materials were internal correspondence between the organizers, lists of participants with their personal data, and photos, as well as financial documents showing that the project was funded not only by Sheikh Talal, but also by several other influential businessmen from various Persian Gulf countries. The most shocking document was an internal memo in which the participants were described not as intellectuals, but as top-quality goods with detailed descriptions of their appearance, education, and family status. The document stated that preference was given to girls from poor families who were unlikely to be able to organize a serious search in case of disappearance. An anonymous source also published an audio recording that was allegedly made by one of the missing participants. The recording featured a female voice speaking English with a noticeable accent. "My name is Aisha Khan. I am from Karachi. If anyone hears this, please tell my family that I am alive, but cannot return home. We are being held in a house where we are not allowed to leave. Sabina from Russia tried to escape, but she was caught and beaten. I haven't seen her since that day." The recording was analyzed by experts who confirmed that it had not been edited. The voice matched that of Aisha Khan, a 20-year-old student from Pakistan who was among the missing conference participants. This was the first direct evidence that the girls were indeed being held against their will. After the publication of this material, the authorities of the United Arab Emirates commented on the situation for the first time. A Dubai police spokesman said that an investigation was underway into an organization that may have been engaged in fraud under the guise of educational programs, but denied any evidence of coercion or human trafficking. At the same time, Sheikh Talal Al Nahyan issued a statement through his representatives in which he categorically denied any connection with the disappearance of the conference participants. He claimed that his name had been used by fraudsters without his knowledge and that he was ready to cooperate with the authorities in investigating the case. By that time, the project's official website had already been shut down, and all email addresses associated with it were no longer responding. Early in the morning on July 19th, cleaning staff at the Opus Hotel discovered a large glass aquarium in one of the banquet halls on the 38th floor, left over from a private event held the day before. The aquarium was installed in the center of the hall and apparently served as a decorative element for some kind of celebration. Cleaner Maria Santos, a Filipino woman who had been working at the hotel for 5 years, later told investigators that at first she thought the aquarium contained a realistic doll, or mannequin, perhaps part of an art installation. Such art objects were not uncommon in Dubai's luxury hotels, especially after private events held by wealthy clients. However, when Maria came closer to start cleaning around the aquarium, she realized that there was a real human body inside. The woman screamed and called the hotel security service. The security guards were the first to arrive at the scene, immediately cordoning off the room and calling the police. The body in the aquarium belonged to a young woman of Eastern appearance. Her face was mutilated beyond recognition. Her eyes had been gouged out, and most of the skin on her body was missing, especially on her legs and arms. There were gunshot wounds in her knees, and her stomach had been cut open, with some of her internal organs removed and laid out around her body inside the aquarium. The water in the aquarium was reddish from the blood, but it was clear enough to see all the gruesome details. At the bottom lay objects that looked like ritual instruments, several knives with ornate handles, metal tongs, and some symbols engraved on small plates. Police officers who arrived at the scene initially thought the discovery was part of an art installation or a special effect for a movie. Hollywood blockbusters were regularly filmed in Dubai, and realistic replicas were commonplace. Only after a forensic expert confirmed that the body was real did a full investigation begin. It was impossible to identify the victim by appearance due to the nature of the injuries. However, personal belongings were found next to the aquarium. A small handbag with documents and jewelry. The passport belonged to Sabina Rakimova, a student from Kazan. The handbag also contained her Russian driver's license, student ID, and several photos with her family. News of the discovery of the body quickly leaked to the media, despite attempts by the authorities to keep the information secret. An anonymous source in the Dubai police provided journalists with photos of the scene, which soon appeared on the internet. The images were so shocking that most publications refused to publish them, even with blurring. Rashid and Aliya Rakimov learned of their daughter's death not from the official authorities, but from news reports on social media. The Russian consulate contacted them only a few hours after the information became public. The consul expressed his condolences and assured them that he would seek a full investigation into the circumstances of Sabina's death. However, the official investigation faced obstacles from the outset. The hotel administration claimed that it did not know who had organized the event in the banquet hall, as the rental had been arranged through third parties. The company listed as the tenant in the documents turned out to be non-existent. There was an empty office at the address provided, and the phone numbers did not answer. The hotel's CCTV recordings for the period from July 15th to 19th were mysteriously damaged due to a technical malfunction. The hotel security service managed to recover only a few short fragments, showing people in dark clothes and masks carrying some objects through the corridors, but it was impossible to make out their faces. The autopsy confirmed that Sabina had been subjected to prolonged torture before her death. The forensic expert determined that the skin had been removed from the living victim, her eyes gouged out, and her knee joints shot with a small caliber weapon. Death was caused by blood loss and pain shock, but the process of torture continued for several hours, possibly days. Investigators were particularly alarmed by the fact that the nature of the injuries was clearly ritualistic. Experts on religious cults suggested that the murder was committed as part of some kind of satanic ritual or occult ceremony. The symbols found in the aquarium did not correspond to any known religious traditions, but bore similarities to the attributes of secret societies. On July 21st, the investigation received another important piece of evidence. Karim al-Mahdi, a delivery service courier who had previously reported the suspicious villa, contacted the police and told them what he had seen a few days before the body was discovered. According to him, on the evening of July 18th, he was delivering an order to a private residence in the Palm Jumeirah area and witnessed a strange scene. Karim said he saw a group of people in black hoodies unloading a large glass container from a minibus. He couldn't see what was inside the container, but he noticed that the people were handling it very carefully, as if it were something fragile and valuable. Karim remembered the address of the residence because he got lost and spent a long time looking for the right house. When the police arrived at the address, the residence was empty. Neighbors said that the house belonged to a local businessman, but he had been abroad for several months. Inside the house, investigators found traces of a recent large gathering of people, leftover food, cigarette butts, empty water bottles. In the basement of the residence, a room was found with walls covered in strange drawings and symbols painted in red. In the center of the room stood an altar made of black stone, with a 5-pointed star inverted with its tip pointing downwards. Next to the altar lay ritual objects, candles, knives, metal bowls, and some manuscripts in Arabic. An examination showed that the red paint on the walls contained traces of human blood. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to several different people, including Sabina Rakhimova. This meant that the girl had spent some time in this house before her death and had been abused there. The discovery at the residence gave the investigation a new direction. It became clear that Sabina's murder was not a random crime, but part of the organized activities of a group of people who practiced some form of Satanism or occultism. The nature of the symbols and ritual objects indicated that the group had a complex hierarchy and operated according to a pre-planned scheme. On July 23rd, an anonymous source sent an audio recording to several international media outlets, which was allegedly made during one of the rituals. The recording contained women's screams, men's voices reciting some kind of incantations in Arabic, and sounds that could be blows or torture. An expert analysis confirmed the authenticity of the recording, but it was impossible to identify the speakers. Linguists determined that the incantations were recited in classical Arabic using archaic forms characteristic of medieval occult texts. This indicated that the organizers of the rituals had serious knowledge of ancient magical practices. The recording also contained a female voice uttering phrases in Russian. "Please stop. I want to go home. Mom, help me." Phonoscopic analysis showed a high probability that this was the voice of Sabina Rakhimova, although it wasn't possible to establish this with absolute certainty, due to the quality of the recording and distortions caused by fear and pain. On July 25th, the investigation gained new momentum thanks to the testimony of 2 Indonesian girls who managed to escape from captivity. Nur Sari and Devi Lestari were found by Indonesian consulate officials at a medical center in Dubai, where they sought help in a state of extreme exhaustion and psychological shock. The girls told a horrific story about what happened to the conference participants after their arrival in Dubai. According to them, after the first day, when everyone was introduced to each other, they were taken to a villa in the Jumeirah area under the pretext of changing locations for more private discussions. There, their documents and phones were immediately taken away, with the explanation that this was a necessary security measure. Noor told investigators that there were about 20 girls from different countries in the house. They were all placed in rooms with no windows, or with boarded-up windows. They were only allowed to leave their rooms when accompanied by guards, and attempts to communicate with each other were strictly suppressed. They were fed once a day with meager food and given limited portions of water. Devi added that a few days after their arrival, what the organizers called training sessions began. The girls were forced to memorize texts in Arabic, the content of which was not explained to them. Those who refused or did not memorize well were subjected to physical punishment. They were beaten, deprived of food, and locked in dark rooms. According to witnesses, Sabina resisted from the very beginning. She refused to participate in the training sessions, demanded that her documents and phone be returned, and threatened to contact the Russian consulate. The organizers first tried to break her will through psychological pressure, but when that didn't work, they resorted to more harsh methods. Noor recalled how one night Sabina was taken from the shared bedroom by several masked men. She was returned only in the morning, unconscious, with bruises all over her body and burns on her arms and legs. After that, the Russian girl became more submissive, but her eyes showed despair. Both witnesses described rituals that were performed in the basement of the villa several times a week. The participants were forced to attend these ceremonies as spectators, explaining that it was part of their education. The rituals included animal sacrifices, reciting spells, and various sadistic acts. Devi said that the leader of the group was a middle-aged man whom everyone called Master Ibrahim. He wore a black hooded robe and never removed the mask covering the lower half of his face. He conducted most of the rituals and gave orders to the other members of the group, which consisted of about 10 people. According to the girls, the group members spoke Arabic among themselves, but sometimes switched to English. Some of them had clearly Western names and accents, which indicated the international nature of the organization. Noor remembered that one of the men introduced himself as David and spoke with an American accent, while a woman named Angelica spoke with a French accent. According to the witnesses, the most frightening ritual was the last one they witnessed. It happened about a week before their escape. Sabina was brought to the basement in a white dress, her hands tied behind her back. Master Ibrahim gave a long speech in Arabic, calling her a rebellious victim who must atone for her pride. Noor began to cry as she recalled the scene. She said that Sabina was laid on a stone altar, and Master Ibrahim began to perform some kind of ritual on her with a knife. At first, it looked like symbolic actions, but then the knife touched the girl's skin, and she screamed in pain. At that moment, all the spectators were led out of the basement. Devi added that they did not see Sabina again the next day. When they asked about her, the guards replied that the Russian girl had completed her training and had been transferred to the next level. They were not told anything else about her fate, but the atmosphere in the house became even more tense and frightening. The Indonesian girl's escape happened by accident. During a food delivery, one of the couriers turned out to be their compatriot, and they managed to pass him a note asking for help. The courier contacted the Indonesian consulate, and a few days later, an operation was organized to free them. The other girls remained in the house, and their fate is unknown. The testimony of Noor and Devi became key evidence that Sabina's murder was not an isolated incident, but part of the systematic activities of an international criminal organization. The investigation obtained specific names, descriptions of the suspect's appearance, and addresses where other victims might be hiding. However, when the police arrived at the addresses provided by the witnesses, all the properties were empty. The organizers had apparently received information about the Indonesian girl's escape and hastily covered up the traces of their activities. There were no documents, computers, or any other evidence left in the houses that could lead to arrests. On July 27th, the Russian embassy sent an official note of protest to the government of the United Arab Emirates, demanding a full investigation into the murder of Sabina Rakhimova and the arrest of all those involved. The document stated that the inaction of the local authorities could be regarded as aiding and abetting international criminal activity. In response, UAE officials stated that a full investigation was underway, but that it was complicated by the international nature of the crime and the difficulty of gathering evidence. They promised close cooperation with Russian law enforcement agencies and the allocation of additional resources to solve the crime. However, in practice, cooperation left much to be desired. Russian investigators were denied direct participation in the investigation under the pretext of the peculiarities of local legislation. Requests for case materials were fulfilled with long delays and in truncated form. At the same time, posts began to appear on social media and forums from people claiming to know of the existence of similar organizations in other countries in the region. Anonymous sources reported cases of young women disappearing in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait under similar circumstances. On August 1st, the international human rights organization Human Rights Watch published a report accusing the UAE authorities of responding inadequately to the case of Sabina Rakhimova. The document stated that the lack of arrests and the classification of the case materials could indicate that influential individuals were protecting the criminal group. The report also contained information that over the past 3 years, more than 50 cases of young women who had arrived on tourist or educational visas had disappeared in the Persian Gulf countries. Most of these cases were never solved, and the official authorities explained the disappearances as voluntary departures to other countries. The report paid particular attention to the role of social media and the internet in recruiting victims. Human rights activists have established that criminal groups create dozens of fake educational and charitable projects through which they lure gullible girls from developing countries with promises of scholarships, internships, and career opportunities. On August 5th, Sabina's family received permission to repatriate their daughter's body for burial in Russia. However, when the coffin arrived in Kazan, it became clear that the UAE authorities had not handed over all of the remains. A forensic expert in Kazan determined that some internal organs were missing, which, according to documents from Dubai, should have been in the body. This circumstance caused a new wave of outrage. Sabina's parents and their lawyers said that the concealment of part of the remains could be linked to an attempt to hide evidence that could point to specific perpetrators of the crime. The Russian authorities sent another diplomatic protest, demanding an explanation. Sabina's funeral took place on August 9th in Kazan. Hundreds of people attended the farewell ceremony: classmates, teachers, and simply sympathetic citizens. The girl's mother, Aliya Rakimova, gave a speech in which she vowed to seek justice and not allow her daughter's death to be forgotten. After the funeral, the Rakimov family began their own investigation. They created a fund in Sabina's memory, which collected information about similar crimes and provided assistance to the families of other victims. Parents of missing girls from 8 countries contacted them, and gradually a picture of a large-scale international operation began to emerge. The foundation also hired private investigators who worked in the Persian Gulf countries. After several months, they managed to establish that the organization behind Sabina's murder had ties to several influential businessmen and politicians in the region. However, it was dangerous to disclose specific names because of the threats that began to be made against the family. On August 10th, an incident occurred that showed how dangerous attempts to investigate this case could be. Rashid Rakimov received an anonymous call in which a male voice with an Arabic accent warned him to stop his provocative activities. Otherwise, his family could repeat the fate of his daughter. After this call, the Rakimov family was placed under protection by local law enforcement agencies. However, threats continued to arrive through various channels: anonymous letters, messages on social media, suspicious people appearing near the house. It became clear that the criminal organization had agents far beyond the UAE. On August 15th, international media published an investigation based on information provided by anonymous sources in law enforcement agencies in several countries. According to this information, the organization that killed Sabina is part of an international network involved in human trafficking under the guise of religious and educational programs. The investigation claimed that the network operates in 12 countries and has revenues of hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Victims are used not only for sexual slavery, but also to participate in ritual killings practiced by certain sects popular among the ultra-rich in the Middle East and the West. According to the investigation, representatives of the so-called black aristocracy, descendants of ancient families who practice occult rituals and consider themselves chosen, play a special role in the organization. These people use their influence and wealth to organize rituals that, according to their beliefs, give them power over other people. On August 20th, the UAE authorities acknowledged for the first time that the case of Sabina Rakimova could be linked to the activities of an international criminal organization. However, they continued to deny any connection between local officials or influential figures and this organization. The creation of a special investigation team to work on such cases was announced. At the same time, arrests began of minor figures, security guards, couriers, and landlords who may have been connected to the crime. However, all those detained either refused to testify or claimed that they did not know the true nature of their employer's activities. None of the organizers or leaders of the group were arrested. On August 25th, Sabina's family received another threat, this time more specific. An envelope with photos of other family members Rashid's parents, his sister, and her children, was slipped into the mailbox of their home in Kazan. Red crosses were drawn on the photos, and at the bottom was written, "Silence is life." After this incident, the Russian authorities offered the family the opportunity to move to another city and change their names. However, Rashid and Alia refused, stating that they would not allow themselves to be intimidated and would fight for justice to the end. They continued the work of the foundation, but now acted more cautiously, using intermediaries and anonymous channels of communication. By the end of August, it became clear that the official investigation in the UAE was at a dead end. All the key witnesses had either disappeared or refused to testify. Physical evidence had been destroyed or lost. The authorities announced that the case remained open, but active investigative efforts had effectively ceased. In September, the international community attempted to put pressure on the UAE authorities through various international organizations. The European Parliament passed a resolution condemning the inaction of the Emirati authorities and demanding an independent investigation. Similar statements were made by the parliaments of several other countries. However, these diplomatic efforts did not yield any real results. The UAE is an important economic partner for many Western countries, and governments were not prepared to enter into a serious conflict over a single, albeit egregious, crime. The case gradually disappeared from the international news. October brought new revelations from anonymous sources. Correspondence between members of the criminal organization was leaked online, discussing plans to eliminate the problem and get rid of the witnesses. The messages mentioned specific names of people who needed to be taken care of, including Noor and Devi, the Indonesian girls who had escaped. This information prompted the Indonesian authorities to take emergency measures to protect their citizens. Both girls were transferred to a secret location, and their testimonies were recorded on video for possible use in an international court. The Indonesian government also launched its own investigation into the activities of such organizations. In November, an event occurred that temporarily brought Sabina's case back into the spotlight. A British citizen named David Smith was arrested in London on suspicion of involvement in an international human trafficking network. A search of his home uncovered video recordings of ritual murders, including, possibly, the last days of Sabina's life. Smith's arrest was the result of a months-long investigation by British police, who were tracking international financial flows linked to human trafficking. It turned out that the suspect regularly transferred large sums of money to accounts in various offshore zones, and then this money was used to finance criminal activities in the Persian Gulf countries. David Smith agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony confirmed that Sabina's murder was part of an elite club for ultra-wealthy clients who paid millions of dollars to participate in ritual killings. The organization operated under the guise of charitable and educational projects, luring victims from poor families around the world. Smith named several participants, including an American billionaire, a French socialite, and 2 members of Gulf royal families. However, by the time the information was passed on to Interpol, all of the individuals named had disappeared. Their accounts had been closed, their real estate sold through front men, and they themselves had vanished into the system of offshore jurisdictions. Video recordings found in Smith's possession became key evidence in the case. One of them recorded the last night of Sabina's life. The girl, tied to the altar, recited prayers in the Tatar language, while the participants in the ritual stood around her in masks and robes. The recording ended at the moment when one of them raised a knife. Experts confirmed the authenticity of the video. The faces of most of the participants were hidden, but their voices and gestures made it possible to establish that they were citizens of at least 5 countries. One of the voices belonged to a woman with a French accent, presumably the same Angelique described by the Indonesian witnesses. In December 2023, a British court sentenced David Smith to 25 years in prison for participating in human trafficking and aiding and abetting murder. This was the only real sentence in the Sabina Rakhimova case. The other members of the organization went unpunished. The UAE authorities declared the case closed due to insufficient evidence to prosecute specific individuals. Sheikh Talal Al Nahyan publicly denied any connection to the crime and filed lawsuits against several media outlets to protect his honor and dignity. Most of the lawsuits were successful. Sabina's family continues to work with the foundation established in her memory. In 2 years, they have managed to help find traces of 13 more missing girls from different countries. 3 were found alive in private clinics in Switzerland and Austria, where they had been placed after participating in rituals that broke their psyche. The rest are still missing. Sabina's mother, Aliya Rakhimova, runs a blog where she publishes new information about the activities of such organizations. She has been summoned for questioning several times as a distributor of false information, but no criminal cases have been opened. The family lives under constant security protection. Threats continue to come in. The Future Muslim Women Project has disappeared without a trace. Its website is closed, and the organizers have vanished. However, experts from Sabina's foundation have identified at least 12 similar projects that continue to operate in different countries under different names. The scheme remains the same. Young, educated girls are lured with promises of scholarships and career opportunities. In official documents, Sabina Rakhimova is listed as a victim of unidentified persons. In Dubai, everyone knows the truth about what happened at the Opus Hotel in July 2023. But this truth remains buried under layers of diplomatic silence, corruption, and fear of powerful people for whom human life is just entertainment for big money. A 19-year-old student from Kazan fell victim to a system that turns education into a trap, faith into a cover, and the dreams of young people into commodities for the darkest desires of those in power. Sabina's story has ended, but the system continues to operate. When the Sheikh's assistant opened a black gift box at a banquet at the Emirates Palace Hotel, inside was the head of 22-year-old Kristina Loganova from Novosibirsk. It was the end of what was supposed to be a dream bachelorette party. Kristina Loganova worked as a makeup artist at a beauty salon on Krasny Prospect in Novosibirsk and ran a small blog about cosmetics on Instagram. She had 3,000 followers and dreamed of a larger audience. In early October 2022, she was contacted by a representative of the Pearl Elite Events Agency with an offer to participate in an advertising campaign for an Arab cosmetics brand in Dubai. The conditions looked tempting: paid flights, accommodation in a 5-star hotel, and a fee for participating in a photo shoot and filming a promotional video. Kristina was told that she would not be alone. 5 other girls from Russia and the former Soviet Union, all bloggers and models, would be traveling with her. The agency manager introduced himself as Farid and communicated only through messengers. He sent official documents with seals, a contract in English, and tickets for a flight from Moscow to Dubai. Kristina showed the documents to her friend Anna, who worked as a lawyer. Anna said that the papers looked genuine, although some of the wording seemed strange to her. She was particularly confused by the clause stating that the participants undertook not to disclose details of the event until it was over, and to hand over their phones to the organizers for the duration of the shoot to ensure confidentiality. On October 10th, Kristina flew to Moscow, where she met the other participants at Domodedovo Airport. Besides her, the group included Alina from Kiev, Ukraine, Katya from Minsk, Belarus, 2 Russians, Lena from Yekaterinburg and Sveta from Kazan, and Inna from Moldova. All the girls were about the same age, between 20 and 25, and all had blogs about beauty or fashion. At the airport, they were met by a middle-aged man who introduced himself as a representative of the agency and accompanied them to check in for their flight. The flight went smoothly. In Dubai, the girls were met by 2 men in business suits who spoke English with an Arabic accent. They were taken to the Atlantis The Palm Hotel, where each was given a separate room. The first day was exactly as the organizers had promised: a photo shoot by the pool, lunch at the hotel restaurant, and a trip on a yacht for sunset photos. Christina posted photos on her stories and wrote to her friend in Novosibirsk that everything was going great. On the second day, the program changed. The girls were told that most of the filming would take place at a private villa where there were better conditions for work. They were taken to different addresses, explaining that this was due to technical requirements. Each would be filmed in an individual look. Christina was taken to a villa in the Jumeirah area, where she was met by 3 men and a middle-aged woman. The woman spoke Russian and introduced herself as the project coordinator. The villa was large and expensive, but the atmosphere quickly became tense. Christina's phone was taken away, explaining that it was a security requirement. All filming must be done on professional equipment without any material leaks. She was given a room on the 2nd floor and told that the main filming would begin tomorrow. Dinner was brought to her room, and the door was locked from the outside. When she asked when she would be able to contact home, she was given an evasive answer. After all, the filming was completed. The third day began with Christina being brought new clothes and cosmetics, as well as several wigs of different colors. The coordinator explained that different looks would be needed for the shoot. The first photo shoot took place in the villa's living room, where Christine was photographed in evening dresses. Then she was asked to change into more revealing clothes. When she refused, she was told that this was a requirement of the client, and that if she did not comply with all the terms of the contract, it would be terminated, and she would be forced to reimburse the costs of her flight and accommodation. By the evening of the third day, the atmosphere had completely changed. Several men in expensive suits arrived at the house and spoke to each other in Arabic. The coordinator told Christina that today there would be a special shoot for the brand's VIP clients. The girl became frightened and demanded her phone back so she could contact her family. In response, she was told that her phone would only be returned after all the terms of the contract had been fulfilled. It was then that Christina managed to secretly use an old phone that she had brought as a spare and which had gone unnoticed during the search. She recorded a voice message to her friend Anna. "They took our phones. We were told that only official photos would be taken. It's not as fun here as it is in the photos. Honestly, it's scary. And the guys are weird." The message was sent via Messenger at 11 p.m. on October 13, 2022. On the 4th day, Christina was awakened early in the morning and told that she had a meeting with the project's main investor. They made her put on professional makeup, did her hair, and dressed her in an expensive dress. When she tried to refuse again, one of the guards grabbed her arm so hard that it left bruises. The coordinator coldly explained that she had no choice. The contract had been signed, and now she had to fulfill all the customer's requirements. That same evening, a man in his 50s arrived at the villa wearing a white national costume. He was accompanied by 4 bodyguards. Christina was brought to the main living room, where the man looked her over for a long time, saying something in Arabic. The coordinator translated. The client was satisfied with her appearance, but wanted to test her submissiveness. When Christina tried to leave, she was held back by force. Her friend Anna in Novosibirsk became concerned when Christina did not respond to her messages for the 2nd day in a row. She tried to contact the Pearl Elite Events Agency, but the phone number did not answer, and the company's website was unavailable. Anna contacted Christina's parents, and they filed a missing person report with the police. However, Russian law enforcement explained that the girl was abroad of her own free will, and that there needed to be compelling reasons to believe that something had happened to her before a search could be launched. Meanwhile, in Dubai, events were unfolding according to the worst-case scenario. Christina continued to resist the demands of her captors, refusing to participate in what the coordinator called exclusive services for VIP clients. She was beaten several times in an attempt to break her will. On the 5th day, a doctor appeared at the villa and gave her several injections, after which Christina became sluggish and weak. On the 6th day, She was no longer at the villa. It was then that Christina realized she had fallen into a trap from which there was no escape. The doctor who had come the day before turned out to be not a medical professional, but a person who specialized in preparing victims of human trafficking. The injections contained strong sedatives that were supposed to make the girl more manageable. However, Christina continued to refuse to participate in what the organizers called special events. The coordinator explained the real situation to her without embellishment. There was no advertising contract. The Pearl Elite Events Agency existed only on paper, registered through frontmen in Yemen, where it is virtually impossible to verify documents. The girls were brought to Dubai to serve wealthy clients from the Persian Gulf countries. Those who agreed to cooperate received money and were able to return home after a while. Those who refused disappeared forever. Christina learned that the other girls from their group were in different villas throughout Dubai. Some of them had already broken down and agreed to the kidnappers' demands. Alina and Katya, according to the coordinator, adapted to the new conditions and now work in an elite brothel for wealthy Arabs. Sveta from Kazan tried to escape and was seriously injured, after which she was sent to a hospital under guard. On the seventh day, a man whom the guards called Doctor came to see Christina. He examined her and said that she was too exhausted from stress and resistance to be useful to regular clients. The coordinator translated his words. There is a special category of customers who prefer fresh goods and are willing to pay significantly more for exclusivity. Christina realized that they were talking about her murder. Meanwhile, Christina's family in Russia was making desperate attempts to find their daughter. The girl's father, Sergei Loganov, who worked as a mechanic at a factory, spent all the family's savings on a trip to Moscow, where he appealed to various authorities. Her mother, Tatiana, a nurse at a local hospital, wrote requests to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the consulate in Dubai, and international human rights organizations. The responses were formal. Without concrete evidence of a crime, Russian diplomats cannot intervene in the affairs of citizens who are abroad of their own free will. Anna continued to analyze Christina's latest messages and discovered an important detail. The metadata of the voice message contained location information. The coordinates pointed to the Jumeirah area in Dubai. She passed this information on to the police, but Russian law enforcement officials said they did not have the authority to conduct operations in the UAE. The eighth day was decisive. In the morning, a man arrived at the villa in an expensive car, whom the coordinator greeted with special respect. It was Sheikh Khaled al-Rashid, an influential businessman from Saudi Arabia with ties to the oil industry and elite real estate. He was about 45 years old, spoke English fluently, and gave the impression of being an educated and well-mannered man. The sheikh examined Christina as if she were a commodity, discussing her parameters and condition with the coordinator. The girl was so weakened by drugs and stress that she could barely stand on her feet. Al-Rashid said she was suitable for a special order he had received from one of his business partners, a Saudi prince who collected exotic trophies. According to the coordinator, the prince ordered the heads of young European women, which were then embalmed in a special way and became part of his private collection. He paid between $500,000 and $1 million for such goods, depending on the age and appearance of the victim. Christina was a perfect fit for the customer's requirements, young, beautiful, with Slavic features. The procedure was to take place in a specially equipped basement of the villa, where the master worked, a man who specialized in preserving biological materials for collectors. Sheikh al-Rashid personally supervised the process, as his reputation with the customer depended on the quality of the work. Christina was brought to the basement at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on October 9th. There, a man in a medical gown was waiting for her, who introduced himself as a preservation specialist. Next to him was a chair resembling a dentist's chair, and tables with instruments. The sheikh explained to the girl in broken Russian, which he had learned specifically for such cases, that her death would be quick and relatively painless if she did not resist. Christina's last words were addressed to her mother, although Tatiana would never hear them. The girl asked to tell her mother that she loved her and that she did not want to hurt her family. The sheikh recorded these words on a dictaphone. He usually attached such recordings to his deliveries as proof of the authenticity of the goods. The murder was carried out by strangulation with a special noose that left no visible damage to the neck. The master worked carefully, as the head had to remain presentable. After Christina's death, her head was separated from her body with professional surgical instruments, treated with preservative solutions, and placed in a special container for transport. The girl's body was disposed of in a crematorium oven belonging to one of the sheikh's companies. The cremation documents were issued under a fictitious name, and the ashes were scattered in the desert near Dubai. No traces of Christina Loganova's existence remained in the UAE, except for her head, which was now on its way to its new owner. But Sheikh al-Rashid's plans were disrupted by an accident that no one could have foreseen. The Saudi prince who had ordered the trophy suddenly died of a heart attack 3 days before the planned delivery of the goods. His heirs knew nothing about their father's collection and were not interested in receiving the order. The sheikh was left with an expensive shipment that he had nowhere to sell. Al-Rashid decided to use the situation to his advantage. He had a complicated relationship with some of his business partners in Riyadh, who suspected him of fraud in the distribution of profits from joint oil projects. He decided to present Christina's head as a gift to one of these partners, Sheikh Faisal al-Sabi, hinting that he knew about his secret passions and could make them public at any moment. The gift was packed in an expensive black box with gold trim, as is customary for particularly valuable gifts among the Arab elite. The box was accompanied by a note in Arabic. "Dear brother, please accept this modest gift as a sign of our mutual understanding. I hope it will remind you of the importance of honesty in our relationship." On November 15th, Sheikh Faisal al-Sabi hosted a banquet to celebrate the conclusion of a major deal to supply oil equipment. The event took place in one of the halls of the Emirates Palace Hotel in Abu Dhabi, where influential businessmen and representatives of the region's ruling families were invited. Among the guests were the UAE Minister of Energy, several Saudi princes, and the heads of the largest oil corporations. The box with the gift was delivered to the hotel by courier service at 7 p.m., an hour before the banquet began. The hotel's security service checked the package using standard methods, X-ray and explosive analysis. Nothing suspicious was found. The box was placed on a special table next to other gifts that guests had brought in honor of the host of the event. The banquet began at 8 p.m. with traditional greetings and toasts. At around 9 p.m., Sheikh Faisal decided to open the gifts in the presence of the guests, in accordance with local traditions of hospitality. He opened the gifts from the most important guests first, leaving the black box for last, as the sender was not indicated. When Sheikh Faisal's assistant lifted the lid of the box, the room fell silent for a few seconds. Then panic ensued. The head of a young woman lay on black silk, her eyes closed, her face neatly made up with professional cosmetics. Around her neck hung a thin gold, heart-shaped pendant, the very one Christina had received from her parents on her 18th birthday and had never taken off. The guests' reaction was instantaneous and chaotic. Several women fainted, men screamed, waiters dropped their trays of food. Sheikh Faisal stood frozen, staring at the contents of the box. His assistant immediately covered the box with a lid, but it was too late. Dozens of people had already seen what was inside. The hotel security service activated the emergency protocol within 20 seconds. All exits from the hall were blocked, and guests were asked to remain in their seats until the police arrived. The hotel manager personally contacted the Abu Dhabi police chief and reported the incident. However, 5 minutes later, he received a call from someone in government circles demanding that the incident be kept as quiet as possible. The police arrived 12 minutes after the call. The officers immediately cordoned off the hall and began questioning witnesses. The box containing the head was seized as evidence. However, half an hour later, the situation changed dramatically. A high-ranking official from the UAE Ministry of Interior arrived at the hotel and held a closed meeting with the police leadership. The result of this meeting was a decision to terminate the investigation on the spot. All witnesses were told that there had been an unpleasant prank involving a realistic dummy and were asked not to spread information about what had happened. The banquet guests were offered monetary compensation for moral damage in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. The hotel's surveillance camera recordings disappeared that same night. The official version was that the video surveillance system had malfunctioned due to technical problems. The employees who had been working in the hall during the banquet were dismissed the next day with large severance payments and sent on vacation abroad at the hotel's expense. Nevertheless, information about the incident leaked out. One of the waiters managed to photograph the contents of the box on his mobile phone before he was forced to delete the pictures. The photo found its way to a local newspaper journalist who published an article about the strange incident at the hotel without naming specific names or circumstances. The article attracted the attention of the international media. A journalist from a British newspaper contacted Russia Today and reported that the head of a young Slavic woman had been found in Abu Dhabi. This information reached the Russian consulate in the UAE, where they began checking lists of missing Russian citizens. The name Kristina Loganova appeared in the missing persons database the very next day. Consulate officials contacted the girl's family and asked them to send photos for comparison. Tatiana Loganova sent recent photos of her daughter, including a close-up of her face, which clearly showed a distinctive scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood injury. The examination showed a complete match. The head from the box belonged to Kristina Loganova. However, it was impossible to obtain official confirmation of this fact from the UAE authorities. The Emirati side stated that no human remains had been found at the Emirates Palace Hotel, and that media reports were based on unverified rumors. The Russian consulate sent an official request about the fate of Kristina Loganova, but received a reply that this Russian citizen had not registered with the consulate upon arrival in the country, as required by law, and her whereabouts were unknown. At the same time, the reply did not mention any remains or material evidence found. The Loganov family tried to get to the truth through the Russian authorities. Sergei Loganov wrote a letter to the Russian president asking for help in investigating his daughter's murder. The response came from the president's administration. The case had been transferred to the foreign ministry to work with the Emirati side through diplomatic channels. The Russian foreign ministry sent a note of protest to the UAE authorities demanding an investigation into the disappearance of the Russian citizen. In response, they received assurances that the Emirati side was ready to cooperate in the search for the missing woman, but that specific evidence that she had indeed been in the UAE was required. Meanwhile, the fate of the other girls from Kristina's group gradually became clear. Alina from Kiev and Katya from Minsk were found alive 2 weeks after the banquet at the Emirates Palace. They were discovered in a private clinic in Dubai, where they were under medical supervision after suffering nervous exhaustion. Both women refused to give detailed testimony about what had happened to them. They told representatives of their country's consulates that they had come to Dubai of their own free will to work in the entertainment industry, and that no one had forced them. All they said about Kristina was that they had last seen her at a villa in the Al Barsha area, from where she had been taken away by unknown individuals. Alina and Katya received new documents to replace their allegedly lost ones and flew home accompanied by consular officials. However, upon arrival in Kiev and Minsk, they disappeared from the sight of the authorities and journalists. Attempts to contact them were unsuccessful. Their phones were turned off, and they did not show up at their home addresses. Svetlana from Kazan was found dead in the morgue of a Dubai city hospital. The official cause of death was a drug overdose. Her body was cremated before her relatives learned of her fate. The ashes were handed over to the Russian consulate without the possibility of an independent examination. Lena from Yekaterinburg and Inna from Moldova have not been found. Their names are on the lists of missing persons, but no traces of their stay in the UAE have been officially found. The girls' families continue to search, but to no avail. An investigation by international journalists revealed links between the girls' disappearance and a human trafficking network operating in the Persian Gulf countries. The Pearl Elite Events Agency turned out to be just one of many front companies used to recruit victims from the former Soviet Union. Journalists have established that the agency was run by a group of people associated with Sheikh Khaled al-Rashid. This group included citizens of various countries: Igor Kovalenko from Russia, Oksana Petrenko from Ukraine, and Amin Haddad from Lebanon. All of them had experience in the modeling business and the tourism industry, which allowed them to easily gain the trust of potential victims. Kovalenko worked in Moscow under the guise of a modeling agency manager and was responsible for finding girls who met the requirements of clients from Arab countries. Petrenko acted as a coordinator and psychologist. She knew how to break down the victims' resistance and force them to obey the kidnappers' demands. Haddad provided logistics and liaised with clients in the region. Sheikh al-Rashid was a key figure in this scheme. His business empire included oil companies, construction firms, and a chain of hotels throughout the Middle East. He used his connections in government circles in various countries in the region to ensure the security of his criminal activities. Al-Rashid had a particularly close relationship with Saudi Arabian Prince Turki al-Faisal, who was known for his executive duties. The prince collected rare art, jewelry, and human remains. He paid between $200,000 and $1 million for young European women, depending on their age and appearance. The scheme was simple and effective. Recruiters found girls in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and other countries in the region, offering them lucrative contracts to work in the modeling or tourism industries. The victims were brought to the UAE under the guise of tourists or business partners, after which their documents were confiscated, and the girls themselves were forced to provide intimate services to wealthy clients. Those who agreed to the kidnappers' terms worked in elite brothels in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and other cities in the region. After several months or years, they were either released home with substantial financial compensation and non-disclosure agreements, or sold to other countries. Those who refused to comply disappeared forever. Kristina Loganova fell into the category of those who were to be eliminated. Her stubborn resistance and attempts to contact her family made her dangerous to the organization. In addition, her appearance was a perfect match for Prince Turki, who was looking for a new exhibit for his collection. Kristina's murder was supposed to remain a secret, known only to a small circle of clients and executors. However, chance ruined the criminals' plans. Prince Turki al-Faisal died of a heart attack the day before the planned delivery of the goods, and Sheikh al-Rashid was left with a cargo that he could not simply throw away. Too much money had been spent on its preparation. The decision to use Kristina's head as a tool to blackmail Sheikh Faisal turned out to be a fatal mistake. Al-Rashid underestimated the public's reaction to such a shocking incident. The photo from the Emirates Palace Hotel ended up on the internet, and despite all the efforts of the UAE authorities, it was impossible to stop the spread of information. International human rights organizations joined the investigation after Kristina Loganova's story received widespread publicity. Amnesty International sent an official request to the UAE authorities demanding an independent investigation into human trafficking in the country. The European Parliament adopted a resolution condemning the inaction of the Emirati authorities in the fight against crime. Under pressure from the international community, the UAE authorities were forced to take visible measures. A special commission to combat human trafficking was set up, which carried out several high-profile arrests of minor accomplices of the criminal network. However, the main figures remained untouchable. Sheikh Khaled Al Rashid left the UAE a week after the incident at the Emirates Palace Hotel. Officially, he left for Saudi Arabia, where he had extensive business interests due to family circumstances. In fact, it was an escape from a possible investigation, as journalists were getting closer and closer to exposing his role in the criminal scheme. Attempts to extradite al-Rashid for questioning were unsuccessful. The Saudi authorities stated that there were no official charges against him, meaning there were no grounds for extradition. The Russian prosecutor's office opened a criminal case into the murder of Kristina Loganova, but the suspect remained out of reach of the investigation. Igor Kovalenko, a Russian member of the criminal group, was arrested in Moscow at the request of Interpol. However, he was released on bail 3 days later and disappeared a week later. According to unconfirmed reports, he is in one of the Latin American countries under a new name. Ukrainian Oksana Petrenko and Lebanese Amin Haddad also escaped justice. Kristina Loganova's family continues to fight for justice, despite obstacles from officials in various countries. Tatiana Loganova has set up a charitable foundation to help the families of human trafficking victims, which assists in the search for missing girls and provides legal support to their relatives. The fund has gathered evidence of the activities of several other criminal groups using similar schemes to lure victims from the former Soviet Union. In 2 years of operation, the fund has managed to rescue 23 girls who fell victim to human traffickers in various countries in the Middle East. Journalistic investigations have revealed the scale of the human trafficking problem in the Persian Gulf region. Experts estimate that between 3,000 and 5,000 young women from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe fall victim to such schemes every year. Most governments in the region prefer to keep quiet about the problem, as publicizing it could damage the country's image as tourist destinations. Corruption in law enforcement agencies and close ties between criminals and the ruling elites make combating human trafficking an extremely difficult task. The story of Kristina Loganova has become a symbol of this problem. Her photo is posted on the websites of dozens of human rights organizations as a reminder that behind the beautiful facades of Dubai's luxury hotels and shopping malls lies the cruel reality of modern slavery. The Emirates Palace Hotel, where the incident with Kristina's head took place, continues to operate as usual. Official representatives of the hotel claim that no incident took place within its walls and that all media reports are based on unreliable information. The hall where Sheikh Faisal's banquet was held has been completely renovated and refurbished. Sheikh Faisal Al Sabi, who received the gruesome gift, left the business and moved to London, where he leads a reclusive lifestyle. According to acquaintances, the incident seriously undermined his mental health. He refuses to discuss what happened and threatens legal action against any journalist who tries to contact him. The Pearl Elite Events Agency was officially liquidated, but dozens of new front companies with similar operating schemes have appeared in its place. The criminals simply changed their name and continued their activities, using new channels to recruit victims through social networks and messengers. The Russian authorities have tightened controls on young women traveling to the Persian Gulf countries, but these measures are only formal. Girls still easily obtain tourist visas and fly to the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and other countries in the region, unaware of the dangers that await them. Interpol has included Sheikh Khaled Al Rashid on its list of most wanted criminals, but his whereabouts remain unknown. According to unconfirmed reports, he lives in Yemen under the protection of a local tribal leader with whom he has long-standing business ties. Prince Turki Al Faisal, for whom Kristina's head was intended, was buried with honors befitting a member of the royal family. The Saudi authorities prefer not to discuss his perverted hobbies, but journalists have managed to find out that a room with human remains of various origins was discovered in his palace. The prince's collection was secretly destroyed by order of the King of Saudi Arabia, who did not want an international scandal. Palace servants who knew about the existence of the collection received large monetary compensation in exchange for their silence and were transferred to work in other residences of the royal family. Kristina Loganova's body was never found. According to the testimony of the surviving victims of the criminal group, the remains of the girls were usually cremated in special ovens and the ashes scattered in the desert. Kristina's family erected a monument in a Novosibirsk cemetery, although the grave remains symbolic. The case of Kristina Loganova formally remains open in Russia, but there are no real prospects for its resolution. The main suspects are hiding in countries that do not extradite their citizens or persons under their protection. Witnesses are either dead or intimidated and refuse to testify. The story took a new turn in 2024 when a woman identifying herself as Oksana Petrenko was arrested in Istanbul. However, forensic examination showed that the detainee had different fingerprints and was not the wanted criminal. The real Petrenko remains at large. Kristina's mother, Tatiana Loganova, continues to receive anonymous threats demanding that she stop the foundation's activities and the search for her daughter's killers. Several times, unknown individuals tried to break into her apartment, but thanks to the security system installed, the attempts were thwarted. The police are investigating these incidents, but the perpetrators have not been found. Kristina's father, Sergei Loganov, could not withstand the psychological pressure and began to abuse alcohol. A year after his daughter's death, he was fired from the factory for violating labor discipline. He is currently undergoing treatment for alcohol addiction at a specialized clinic. Kristina's friend Anna, who was the first to raise the alarm about her disappearance, emigrated to Canada and works there as a legal advisor for an organization that helps victims of human trafficking. She regularly speaks at international conferences, telling Kristina's story as an example of what carelessness can lead to for young girls. The social networks where Kristina ran her beauty blog deleted her accounts at the request of the UAE authorities. The official reason was a violation of community rules. In fact, it was an attempt to erase all traces of the girl from the internet so that her story would not draw attention to the problem of human trafficking in the region. Nevertheless, Kristina Loganova's name became known far beyond Russia. Her story formed the basis of a documentary film that was shown at European film festivals and won several awards. The film is banned from screening in the Persian Gulf countries, but is widely distributed via the internet. International organizations are using Kristina's case as a precedent to pressure governments in the region to step up the fight against human trafficking. However, real change is slow because too many influential people have a stake in maintaining the status quo. Kristina Loganova's story remains unfinished. Her killers are still at large, the criminal network continues to operate under different names, and new victims fall into the same traps. The black gift box with the head of a 22-year-old girl has become a symbol of impunity and the authorities' indifference to the fate of ordinary people. In the Persian Gulf countries, where oil dollars buy silence and create the illusion of prosperity, such parcels do not really become a reason for serious investigation. Behind the glittering facades of skyscrapers and luxury hotels lies a world where human life has a price and justice is sold to the highest bidder. No one will know I'm here. This caption under a photo of a crying woman, sent from an encrypted account, became a digital ghost, the last known message from Helga Peterson. A message that never reached its recipient, remaining in the deleted files of a phone belonging to one of the most influential people in Qatar. The story of the disappearance of 30-year-old Helga Peterson, a designer from Hamburg, did not receive wide coverage in the world press. Incidents affecting the interests of the Middle Eastern elite rarely leak beyond closed diplomatic channels and the quiet offices of private detective agencies. The first few months of 2019 were eventful for Helga, which, according to her close friend Clara Meyer, seemed to her like the script of a Hollywood movie. Helga was a talented yet relatively unknown fashion designer who owned a small studio in the Altona district of Hamburg. Her work was characterized by minimalist cuts and attention to complex fabric textures, but she was unable to break into the highly competitive European market. Financial difficulties and creative stagnation created fertile ground for offers that promised a quick solution to all her problems. Such an offer was made in February 2019 by the elite Swiss agency Global Elite Solutions, which positioned itself as a concierge service for ultra-wealthy clients. In reality, as a private investigator hired by the Peterson family would later discover, the agency specialized in finding companions for influential individuals, guaranteeing complete confidentiality and legal support for contracts. The client who showed interest in Helga turned out to be 47-year-old Sheikh Yusuf Al-Tamimi, a member of one of the side branches of the ruling dynasty of Qatar and a major player in the liquefied natural gas market. His fortune, by the most conservative estimates, was estimated at billions of dollars. An agency representative contacted Helga with a unique opportunity to become a personal style consultant and wardrobe designer for a Middle Eastern tycoon with a virtually unlimited budget. She was promised her own studio in Doha, access to the rarest materials, and full funding for her own clothing collection. After several video calls, during which Yusuf Al-Tamimi appeared to her as a charming, educated, and art-loving man, Helga agreed to a personal meeting in Paris. The Sheikh's courtship was methodical and overwhelming. He rented a penthouse for her at the Georges Feyre Hotel, gave her jewelry from Cartier, and antique books on the history of costume. He talked about her talent, about a future in which she would become the queen of fashion, free from financial worries. He made no indecent proposals, cultivating the image of a patron of the arts, enchanted by her genius. Helga's family, particularly her older brother Thomas Peterson, reacted to what was happening with undisguised skepticism. He was alarmed by the speed with which events were unfolding and the opacity of the Sheikh himself. However, Helga, blinded by the prospects and scale of Al-Tamimi's personality, ignored the warnings. In early March 2019, she signed a contract with a shell company registered in Cyprus. The 120-page contract not only outlined her professional responsibilities, but also included a clause prohibiting her from disclosing any information about the client's personal life. This document effectively transferred control over her movements and contacts to her employer. In mid-March, she left Hamburg, telling her family that she was heading to Doha to work on her dream project. Her new home was one of the villas in the gated luxury complex West Bay Lagoon, located on an artificial island off the coast of Doha. The complex was a maze of luxurious mansions separated from each other by high walls, with private beaches and round-the-clock security. It was impossible to enter the territory without an invitation from a resident. For the first few weeks, Helga's life was truly like a fairy tale. The Sheikh provided her with a staff of servants, a personal driver, and unlimited credit cards. She regularly sent photos to her family and friends from luxurious restaurants, boutiques, and aboard a private yacht. However, her messages, which cybersecurity experts later analyzed, already showed signs of alarm. She mentioned that she was rarely alone, constantly accompanied by bodyguards, and that her new phone, a gift from Yusuf, seemed to be malfunctioning. Some messages did not go through, and calls were cut off. By the end of April, the tone of her letters had changed. She wrote that she was tired, that work on the collection had not yet begun, and that her days were reduced to attending social events, where she played the role of a beautiful accessory. She complained of total control. The Sheikh checked her calls, read her correspondence, and flew into a rage if she tried to contact her male friends in Germany. The promised paradise life turned out to be a gilded cage from which there was no escape. The last call to her brother took place in early May. Helga spoke in a whisper. She was frightened. She said that she had made a mistake and wanted to return home, but did not know how. She mentioned that her passport and personal documents were being held by Yusuf. The next day, her phone stopped answering. All attempts by her family to contact her through the Global Elite Solutions Agency were met with silence. A week later, representatives of the agency reported that Mrs. Peterson had terminated her contract of her own accord and left Qatar for an unknown destination. In mid-May 2019, the Peterson family officially reported her disappearance to the Hamburg police. The German police, in turn, sent a request to Interpol, but the investigation effectively reached a dead end. The Qatari authorities were reluctant to cooperate, citing sovereignty and the lack of evidence of a crime on their territory. Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi's status and influence made him virtually immune to his country's law enforcement system. To the outside world, Helga Peterson had disappeared. Powerlessness is the word that best describes the state of the Peterson family in the months that followed. Official channels of communication turned into a bureaucratic desert. The German Foreign Ministry expressed deep concern, but emphasized the need to observe diplomatic protocol. The Qatari side, through its embassy in Berlin, provided a laconic response. German citizen Helga Peterson entered the country on a private invitation and then left its territory, as confirmed by border service records. However, they refused to provide a copy of these records, citing personal data protection laws. Every request from the German police sent through Interpol channels remained unanswered. The family found themselves trapped in a jurisdictional vacuum. For Germany, the crime was not committed on their territory, and for Qatar, there was no crime at all. Yusuf al-Tamimi remained an untouchable figure, protected by his status and a wall of silence erected by his legal team. Thomas Peterson, Helga's brother, refused to accept this situation. He took indefinite leave from work and devoted himself entirely to the search for his sister. He created a website dedicated to her disappearance. He tried to attract the attention of the press, but the major publications were reluctant to publish material containing accusations against a member of Qatar's ruling family without solid evidence. By August 2019, having exhausted all official avenues, Thomas decided to seek the services of a private specialist. He chose the Berlin-based consulting agency Fortitudo Security, headed by Daniel Fischer, a former operative of the German Federal Intelligence Service. Fischer specialized in cases that government agencies refused to take on: kidnappings in high-risk areas, corporate espionage, and searching for people missing abroad. After studying the materials provided by the Peterson family, Fischer immediately identified the scale of the problem. A direct investigation in Qatar was out of the question. Any suspicious activity by a foreign agent would lead to his immediate arrest and an international scandal. The only option was to work remotely, gathering information bit by bit from open and closed sources. Fischer spent his first weeks compiling a detailed psychological and biographical profile of Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi. He was not just a businessman, but a key figure in the complex intra-clan intrigues of the Qatari elite. His public image, that of an enlightened patron of the arts, an Oxford graduate, and a connoisseur of European culture, was strikingly different from the information Fischer was receiving through his unofficial channels. Fischer discovered a pattern. Over the past 10 years, at least 4 young women from Europe and North America associated with al-Tamimi had disappeared under similar circumstances. Among them were a French model, a Canadian student, and a British gallery owner. In all cases, the story unfolded according to the same scenario. The Sheikh charmed them, promising to support their careers, took them to Doha, and then, after a few months, the women disappeared without a trace. Their families received generous financial compensation through offshore accounts in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. None of these cases ever came to the attention of the police. It was a well-oiled machine, where human life was just another item on the expense side of the budget. The breakthrough in the case came unexpectedly. While analyzing social media and forums for expatriates working in Qatar, Fisher's team stumbled upon a post left by a woman under a pseudonym. She wrote about the unbearable working conditions at a villa in West Bay Lagoon and mentioned a terrible story with a German designer. It took several weeks of painstaking work to identify the author of the post. She turned out to be a Filipino citizen named Rosalyn Magsaysay, who worked as a maid at the Al Tamimi residence and was fired at the end of May 2019, almost immediately after Helga's disappearance. Fisher found Rosalyn in the suburbs of Manila. The woman lived in constant fear. When she was fired, the Sheikhs security service forced her to sign non-disclosure documents, threatening to take revenge on her family in her homeland. It was tough to convince her to testify. Fisher guaranteed her and her family's relocation to Europe and a witness protection program, using his old connections in government circles. Rosalyn's story was the missing link in the chain of events. She confirmed that in the last weeks of her life at the villa, Helga was profoundly depressed and constantly in conflict with the Sheikh. He forbade her from using the internet and took away her personal German phone. According to Rosalyn, the last argument took place on the night of May 3rd. Helga accused Yusuf of being a liar and a jailer and said she would find a way to report everything to the embassy. The Sheikh, who was drunk that evening, flew into a rage. Rosalyn heard screams, the sound of blows, and a dull thud, as if something heavy had fallen on the floor. After that, a dead silence fell over the villa. The next morning, the Sheikh announced to the staff that Mrs. Peterson had left in urgent circumstances due to family matters. However, none of the servants saw her leave the house or a car come to take her to the airport. Moreover, Rosalyn noticed that Helga's 2 large travel bags were still in the dressing room. The most ominous detail of her story was that the day after Helga's supposed departure, a team of gardeners who did not belong to the regular service company arrived at the villa. These workers labored in the farthest part of the garden, near the wall, where a large stone statue of a lion, brought from Italy, stood. They worked all night using a small excavator and left in the morning. After their visit, the ground around the statue was freshly dug up and covered with new rolled turf. Rosalyn was sure that something had been buried in the garden that night. Rosalyn Magsaysay's testimony significantly altered the case's status, but it also created a challenging tactical dilemma for Daniel Fisher and the Peterson family. They had information about the probable burial site, but there was no legal way to use it. Any attempt to initiate a search of Sheikh al-Tamimi's villa, based on the testimony of a single witness, who was also thousands of kilometers away, was doomed to failure. Moreover, premature disclosure of the source of the information would put Rosalyn in mortal danger. The Qatari security service, known for its efficiency, would have easily found her and silenced her forever. Fisher understood that acting head-on was tantamount to destroying the only chance for justice. It was necessary to create a situation in which the discovery of the remains would appear to be accidental, rather than the result of a targeted search. The strategy shifted from a direct investigation to a multi-step combination aimed at making the system work against itself. The first step was to create a comprehensive confidential dossier. It was not just a report, but a meticulously compiled document designed to influence the highest echelons of German diplomacy. It included a complete biography of the Sheikh with an emphasis on his shady side, a detailed analysis of previous cases of women's disappearances, the financial schemes used to buy their silence, and a complete, notarized transcript of Rosalyn Magsaysay's testimony. A key element of the dossier was a technical report, prepared by a satellite image analysis expert hired by Fisher. Comparing archival images of the West Bay Lagoon Villa from April and late May 2019, the expert found clear signs of soil disturbance in the very part of the garden described by Rosalyn. The May images clearly showed a rectangular area that differed in color and density from the surrounding area, irrefutable evidence of recent earthworks. With this document in hand, Fisher used his old connections to arrange an informal meeting with a high-ranking official from the Middle East Department of the German Foreign Ministry. The reaction was predictable, caution bordering on fear. A confrontation with Qatar, one of Europe's key suppliers of liquefied natural gas, could lead to a serious energy and diplomatic crisis. However, the evidence presented by Fischer, especially the witness testimony backed up by satellite data, was too compelling to ignore. The German government could not launch an official investigation, but it could take action through unofficial channels. The German ambassador in Doha received an encrypted dispatch with instructions to apply soft pressure. At one of the protocol meetings with a representative of the Qatari Foreign Ministry, the ambassador casually mentioned the case of the missing German citizen, Helga Petersen, noting that more and more questions are being asked in Berlin, and that this story could negatively affect the investment climate if a satisfactory solution is not found. Sheikh al-Tamimi's name was not mentioned, but the hint was crystal clear. At the same time, Fischer's team continued to monitor all activity related to the Sheikh around the clock, and here luck smiled on them, which, however, was the result of systematic work. Analyzing contracts signed by one of the construction companies owned by al-Tamimi, Fischer's analysts discovered a large order for landscaping work on the grounds of his villa in West Bay Lagoon. The project, scheduled for November 2019, included the construction of a new swimming pool and the redesign of the garden in the very area where the lion statue was located. The Sheikh's motives were simple. He was a man obsessed with status and luxury, and he was constantly remodeling his residence. He was so confident of his impunity that he had probably already forgotten about the terrible secret that the earth in his garden held. This information proved decisive. The German ambassador received new instructions. At the next meeting, he again raised the subject of the missing Helga Petersen and, referring to unverified intelligence, mentioned that her disappearance could have been violent and that her body might still be in Qatar. It was a calculated move. Germany did not make a direct accusation, but made it clear that it had information and warned that any accidental discovery of remains would be closely scrutinized. The calculation was that the Qatari authorities, not wanting an international scandal, would not allow the Sheikh to hide the evidence if it was found. On November 22, 2019, a team of workers from Pakistan and Nepal began work in the villa's garden. The Sheikh was on a business trip to London at the time. At around 4 p.m., the bucket of a small excavator digging soil at the site of the future pool basin struck a hard object. The workers, thinking it was a rock, tried to remove it. When they cleared the ground, they saw a large bundle of thick black polyethylene wrapped in several layers of reinforced tape. The foreman, an elderly Pakistani man, immediately halted all work and, realizing the seriousness of the situation, called the local police directly, not the villa's security service. The patrol that arrived at the scene cordoned off the area. They did not open the package immediately. It was carefully removed and sent to the central morgue in Doha for examination. The news of the discovery of human remains at the villa of a member of the ruling family instantly reached the country's top leadership. And at that very moment, German diplomacy came into play again. The German embassy sent an official note to the Qatari Foreign Ministry demanding that its representative be allowed to participate in the identification of the body and be given access to the case files, citing strong reasons to believe that the remains found could belong to missing German citizen Helga Petersen. The trap had been sprung. It was now virtually impossible to conceal the discovery or falsify the examination results under the scrutiny of German diplomats. The procedure that followed the discovery of the remains became the arena of a quiet struggle between the Qatari judiciary, seeking to maintain control over the situation, and the German side, insisting on maximum transparency. Under pressure from diplomats, the Qatari authorities took an unprecedented step. Dr. Klaus Richter, a forensic anthropologist from the German Federal Criminal Police Office, was admitted to the forensic examination team as an observer. His presence ruled out the possibility of falsification or concealment of the results. The expert's conclusion was unequivocal, leaving no room for interpretation. The remains belonged to a Caucasian woman between the ages of 25 and 35 years old. The cause of death was multiple skull fractures inflicted by a heavy blunt object, as well as asphyxia caused by compression of the neck, as evidenced by a fracture of the hyoid bone. The time of death was established with an accuracy of several weeks and fully corresponded to the period of Helga Petersen's disappearance. After cleaning, the fabric fragments found with the body were identified as silk from a dress by the French fashion house Givenchy, the same dress Helga was wearing in the last photo she sent to her friend in Doha. The final and irrefutable proof came from genetic testing. DNA samples taken from the bone tissue were sent to Germany for comparison with the genetic material provided by Helga's parents. The match was 100%. On December 28, 2019, the Qatari authorities officially notified the German embassy that the body found at the villa in West Bay Lagoon had been identified as the remains of German citizen Helga Petersen. Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi was detained immediately upon his return from London. However, his detention had nothing to do with standard procedure. He was not placed in a detention center, but was escorted to one of his family's country palaces, effectively putting him under luxurious house arrest. He was immediately surrounded by a team of top lawyers from London and Beirut who began to build a defense strategy. The strategy was predictable: complete denial of guilt and shifting of responsibility. During the first interrogations, the Sheikh said he was shocked and devastated. He claimed to love Helga and considered her his closest friend. According to his account, she left Qatar in early May after a minor quarrel, and he had no idea what had happened to her afterward. He called the discovery of her body on the grounds of his villa a monstrous provocation organized by his enemies in business or politics to discredit him. His lawyers developed this theory, claiming that unknown assailants killed Helga elsewhere and then broke into the villa and buried the body to frame the Sheikh. This version, however, did not stand up to scrutiny. The residence's security system, which included motion sensors, dozens of cameras, and round-the-clock security posts, made it virtually impossible to enter unnoticed for digging. While the Sheikh's lawyers tried to create a media storm, Qatari investigators, working under the tacit supervision of their German colleagues, focused on digital evidence. All electronic devices belonging to al-Tamimi were seized. And this is where the defense suffered a crushing defeat. Cybercrime specialists managed to recover data deleted from the Sheikh's main phone several months earlier. Among hundreds of gigabytes of useless information, they found the very file they were looking for. A photo taken with the front camera late in the evening on May 2nd, 2019. The picture showed Helga Petersen's tear-stained face. Analysis of the background lighting and interior elements captured in the frame clearly indicated that the photo was taken in her bedroom at the villa. But the main piece of evidence was the message she had typed in the Messenger app, but never sent. "No one will know I'm here." The file's metadata contained the exact time and geolocation, which completely coincided with the place and time of her death, as established by the investigation. This discovery rendered the entire line of defense ineffective. The photograph was irrefutable proof that Helga had no intention of leaving voluntarily. She was a captive who was aware of the mortal danger she faced. A public trial of a member of the ruling family was absolutely out of the question. Such a trial would have caused irreparable damage to Qatar's reputation and could have provoked an internal political crisis. The solution was found in the traditions of the closed political system of the Middle East. In February 2020, a closed session of the Sharia court was held. The public was only informed that the trial was taking place. Based on the evidence presented, witness testimony, forensic medical examination results, and digital evidence, Yusuf al-Tamimi was found guilty of murder. However, The sentence was as lenient as possible. Instead of the death penalty or life imprisonment in a state prison, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in one of the remote residences belonging to the state. He was stripped of all his business assets, his name was removed from all official lists, and his public existence effectively ceased. To the outside world, he ceased to exist. This was the ultimate punishment for a member of the elite. Helga Petersen's family received her remains in March 2020. They buried her in a small cemetery near Hamburg. There was no official apology or public admission of guilt from the Qatari authorities. However, a multi-million-dollar sum was transferred to the family's account through a Swiss bank as compensation. Rosalind Magsaysay and her family were successfully smuggled to Germany, where they were provided with new documents and granted asylum. The story of Helga Petersen never became public knowledge, remaining just one of many untold tragedies that occurred behind the high walls of palaces, where absolute power and impunity blurred the line between fairy tale and deadly trap. On February 21, 2021, Elena Vinogradova received a final message from her daughter on her phone. "It's strange here, Mom. I can't use my phone." 18 days later, the body of 21-year-old Maria was found in the basement of a private villa in Dubai, mutilated, with signs of prolonged violence and torture. The story began in January of that year in the industrial city of Perm, when Maria Vinogradova received a message on Instagram from a representative of the Orientix Models modeling agency. At the time, her profile had just over 3,000 followers, photos from local beauty contests, and several promotional posts for regional clothing brands. Maria worked as an administrator in a dental clinic, but dreamed of a career in the fashion and beauty industry. The message came from an account with a verification checkmark and thousands of followers. The agency representative offered her an exclusive contract for an advertising campaign for a premium cosmetics brand in the United Arab Emirates. The terms looked tempting: $30,000 per month of shooting, paid flights, accommodation in a 5-star hotel, and full support. Elena Vinogradova recalls that her daughter showed her the correspondence with the agency representatives. All the documents looked professional: official forms, stamps, detailed project descriptions. The agency even provided copies of licenses and certificates confirming the legality of its activities in the UAE. The company's website featured portfolios of successful models, customer reviews, and information about collaborations with well-known brands. "I checked them out on the internet," says Elena Vinogradova. "They had a beautiful website, lots of photos from events, and contact details for offices in different countries. Everything looked serious." Maria contacted several girls from the agency's portfolio via social media. They all confirmed that they had worked with Orientix Models and were satisfied with the collaboration. The paperwork took 2 weeks. The agency took care of obtaining a work visa, booking tickets, and arranging airport transfers. Maria only had to prepare her passport and undergo a medical examination at the specified clinic. Agency representatives regularly contacted her, answered questions, and sent additional information about the project. The day before departure, Maria received the final package of documents: tickets for an Emirates flight, a voucher for accommodation at the Hyatt Regency Hotel, and a detailed program for the first week of filming. A project coordinator was supposed to meet her at the airport with a sign with her name on it. All expenses in the UAE were covered by the agency using a corporate card. On February 14th, Maria flew from Perm to Moscow, and from there on a direct flight to Dubai. Her mother last saw her daughter in the morning at Bolshoi Savino Airport. Maria was excited about the upcoming trip and constantly photographed everything that was happening for her blog on social media. She planned to keep an online diary about her work as a model in the UAE and had already come up with hashtags for future posts. Upon arrival in Dubai, Maria sent her mother several photos from the airport and a message saying that she had been met by agency representatives. In the first few days, she was in regular contact, talking about her hotel accommodation, meeting other models, and preparing for photo shoots. Her messages were positive, although she complained about the heat and unfamiliar food. On February 17th, the tone of Maria's messages changed. She wrote to her mother that they had been moved to another location because the hotel was undergoing renovations. She described the new accommodation as a private villa for models, but noted that there were strict security rules. The girls were not allowed to use their phones without supervision, leave the premises unaccompanied, or communicate with strangers. "Everything here is organized in a strange way," Maria wrote to her friend Anastasia Kruglova. "I can't use my phone without permission." All the girls are silent. They seem to be afraid to say anything, but they say that this is normal for projects of this level. This was the last message her loved ones received from her. On February 18th, Maria's social media accounts were deactivated, and her phone number became unavailable. When Elena Vinogradova tried to contact the agency, it turned out that all contact details had stopped working. The Orientix model's website showed a server error, emails were not responding, and phone numbers were disconnected. Maria's mother immediately contacted the Russian consulate in the UAE. Consular officials recorded the appeal and promised to investigate, but noted that Maria had officially entered the country on a tourist visa, not a work visa, as the agency had claimed. This meant that she had no legal basis for working in the emirate. Attempts to find traces of Orientix model's activities in the UAE were unsuccessful. It turned out that the company was registered in an offshore zone, and the office addresses listed on the website were fictitious. The licenses and certificates provided to Maria were high-quality forgeries, but had no legal force. Russian law enforcement agencies opened a criminal case on charges of human trafficking, but their ability to conduct investigative activities in the UAE was limited. Local authorities formally cooperated with the Russian side, but emphasized that they had no information about the whereabouts of citizen Vinogradova. For a month, Maria's relatives tried to find her in Dubai on their own. They shared her photos on social media, reached out to Russian-speaking communities in the UAE, and posted missing person ads. Several people reported seeing a girl who looked like Maria in the Dubai Marina area, but these reports didn't lead to any concrete results. On March 22nd, a publication about the model who had disappeared in the UAE appeared in Russia. Journalists contacted the Vinogradov family and published details of Maria's disappearance. The article was widely circulated on social media, but there was no official response from the UAE authorities. A breakthrough in the case came on March 31st, when videos appeared on the dark web that changed the course of the investigation. An anonymous user under the pseudonym Venger posted an archive of video files on a closed forum marked for unpaid fees. The recordings were made with hidden cameras in a private club for wealthy clients, located on the 57th floor of the Al Fatan Tower in Dubai. The video showed a room with transparent walls, resembling a display window. Inside was a completely naked woman with a shaved head, chained by the neck to the wall with a metal chain. The girl hardly moved, her body covered with bruises and marks from electric shocks. Behind the glass walls, men in expensive suits sat with glasses of champagne, watching the proceedings as if it were a theatrical performance. The recording lasted several hours and showed the systematic abuse of the captive. Masked men entered the room and subjected the woman to various forms of physical and sexual violence. The spectators behind the glass commented on what was happening, placed bets, and gave instructions to the participants. The whole process was organized as commercial entertainment for a select group of clients. The victim was identified by distinctive scars on her left shoulder from an operation Maria had undergone as a child. Elena Vinogradova immediately recognized these marks when law enforcement officers showed her screenshots from the video. In addition, in one of the recordings, the girl said a few words in a weak voice. "Masha from Perm, please help me." Analysis of the video file's metadata showed that the footage was shot between February 18th and March 6th. The recordings were made from several angles with professional cameras, indicating a pre-planned video surveillance system. The image and sound quality was so high that it was possible to distinguish the faces of some of the participants and spectators. The UAE authorities immediately launched an operation to close the establishment. On April 2nd, police special forces raided the Al Fatan Tower, but by the time they arrived, the premises had been completely destroyed. The fire extinguishing system had been activated manually, flooding all the rooms and destroying the evidence. The glass room where Maria was held was dismantled and removed by unknown persons. Investigators determined that the club operated under the guise of a private art center called the Orient Contemporary Art Gallery. Officially, the establishment positioned itself as a venue for exclusive exhibitions and cultural events. Membership in the club cost $500,000 per year, and a single visit to a special show cost $50,000 per person. The investigation revealed that the club was backed by a network of influential businessmen and officials from various Middle Eastern countries. The main organizer was Saudi Arabian citizen Faisal al-Hazrani, owner of the Support Young Artists Charitable Foundation. The foundation was officially involved in financing talented young people from developing countries, but in fact, served as a cover for human trafficking. Al-Hazrani had extensive connections in diplomatic circles and was considered a respectable philanthropist. His foundation financed several prestigious cultural projects in Europe and America, which gave him a positive reputation in international circles. At the same time, he oversaw a network of front modeling agencies in Eastern European countries. An analysis of the financial flows of Al-Hazrani's foundation revealed suspicious transfers to accounts in various jurisdictions. Over the past 3 years, more than $20 million has passed through companies under his control, the sources of which could not be established. A significant portion of the funds was transferred through cryptocurrency exchanges and offshore banks. The investigation established that the Orientix Models modeling agency was one of many projects run by the criminal network. Over the past 2 years, similar agencies have operated under the names Vostok Talents, Premium Models Dubai, and Arab Dream Casting. All of them used the same schemes to attract girls and disappeared after recruiting another group of victims. Russian law enforcement agencies found that at least 12 girls from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova disappeared after signing contracts with these agencies. All of the victims were between the ages of 18 and 25, were attractive, and were active on social media. Their last messages to their relatives were very similar to what Maria wrote. An examination of social media correspondence revealed that the criminals had carefully studied the profiles of potential victims. They selected girls from small towns who had no serious experience in the modeling business, but dreamed of a career. Particular attention was paid to those who posted photos in swimsuits or revealing clothing. Recruiters created fake accounts of successful models who supposedly worked with the agency and recommended its services. These profiles contained professional photos, reviews of their work, and demonstrations of a luxurious lifestyle. Girls who received offers from the agency saw these accounts as confirmation of the company's reliability. Technical analysis of the fake agency's websites revealed that they were all created on the same hosting platform and used similar design templates. The domains were registered to front men through anonymous registrars, making it difficult to identify the real owners. After each operation, the websites were deleted and the associated social media accounts were deactivated. Analysis of video recordings from the club made it possible to identify several regular visitors. Among them were businessmen from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, as well as citizens of European countries working in the oil industry. All of them had high incomes and influential connections in their countries. The club's operating system required strict confidentiality and mutual responsibility among its members. Each new member underwent a thorough background check and paid a large sum of money as a guarantee of non-disclosure. Video recordings of all events were stored in encrypted form and could be used as compromising evidence against the participants. The victims were held in the basements of several villas in the prestigious Dubai Marina area. The buildings were rented through front companies for short periods, which allowed the locations where the people were held to be changed frequently. The girls were transported in minibuses with tinted windows during hours of minimal traffic. Medical examinations showed that the victims were systematically pumped with drugs to suppress their will to resist. Drugs were used that caused disorientation and amnesia, making it difficult for them to remember the details of what was happening or their location. The doses were constantly increased, leading to serious health problems. On March 6th, Maria Vinogradova died of internal bleeding and dehydration in one of the basement rooms of a rented villa in the Dubai Marina area. According to the medical examination, death was caused by multiple internal injuries sustained during systematic abuse. The body was discovered by investigators only 3 weeks after the girl's death. The criminals tried to cover up the traces of the murder using a mobile cremation oven, which they installed in the basement of the same villa. The equipment was custom-made and allowed for the complete destruction of human remains without leaving any traces. The furnace ran on liquid fuel and did not require connection to city utilities, making it virtually invisible to regulatory authorities. Traces of the cremation furnace's use were discovered during a search of the villa on Al Barcha Street. Several rooms for holding victims were equipped in the basement, which covered an area of about 100 square meters. The walls were soundproofed with special materials, and the ventilation system operated independently of the main building. Traces of blood and other biological materials remained on the floor. An examination showed that at least 5 people were held in this room at the same time. Personal belongings belonging to missing girls from different countries were found in different rooms. Among them was an engraved bracelet, which relatives identified as belonging to Maria Vinogradova. Documents belonging to 4 other girls from Russia and Ukraine were also found. The video surveillance system in the villa had been dismantled before the police arrived, but technical specialists recovered data from the damaged hard drives. The recordings showed the moments when the victims were delivered, their detention in the basement rooms, and the subsequent removal of the bodies. The chronology of events made it possible to establish the exact dates of death of several missing girls. An analysis of telephone conversations recovered from mobile operators' servers showed active coordination between members of the criminal group. Between February and March, the number of calls between key figures increased several times over. Communication between Faisal al-Hazrani and local coordinators was particularly intense. The investigation established that the operation to destroy evidence began even before the videos appeared on the darknet. On March 28th, 3 days before the materials were published, a mass cleanup of all objects related to the network began. This indicates that the criminals had information about the impending data leak. The user Venger, who published the videos, turned out to be one of the club's regular customers. According to the investigation, his real name is Markus Schmidt, a German citizen who worked as the technical director of an oil company in Dubai. The motive for the publication was a conflict with the organizers over an unpaid amount of $200,000 for exclusive services. Schmidt secretly copied the videos from the club's servers over several months, planning to use them as insurance in case of a conflict with the organizers. When the club's management refused to pay him the promised amount for attracting new customers, he decided to take revenge by making the compromising material public. German authorities detained Schmidt at the request of Interpol, but he managed to destroy most of the evidence of his involvement in the crimes. Only copies of some video recordings and correspondence with the organizers of the network were found in his apartment in Hamburg. Schmidt partially admitted his guilt, but claimed that he was unaware of the coercive nature of the victims' participation in the show. Financial documents seized during a search of al-Hazrani's office revealed the extent of the criminal activity. Over 3 years, more than $50 million passed through the organization's accounts. The money came from private individuals in the Persian Gulf, Europe, and North America, under the guise of charitable donations. Some of the funds were used to bribe officials in the countries where the victims were recruited. The traces of the transfers lead to Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, and other Eastern European countries. The recipients were employees of visa services, border agencies, and law enforcement agencies. The bribes ranged from $5,000 to $50,000 per operation. The criminal network's scheme involved creating legal grounds for the victims to travel abroad. Front agencies prepared all the necessary documents, including work visas, medical certificates, and insurance policies. This allowed them to avoid suspicion from border services and consular officials. At airports, the victims were met by people with fake agency documents. They were immediately isolated from other passengers under the pretext of VIP service and taken to pre-prepared premises. From that moment on, the girls were completely under the control of the criminals and deprived of the opportunity to contact the outside world. The system of control over the victims included constant video surveillance, restricted access to means of communication, and threats of reprisals against relatives. The girls were shown photographs of their families and told the addresses of their loved ones. This created psychological pressure and forced the victims to obey the criminals' demands. Medical care for the victims was provided by bribed doctors who concealed the true causes of injuries and illnesses. At least 3 medical workers were involved in the network, receiving large sums of money for their silence. They provided the victims with the necessary medication and treated the consequences of violence without notifying the authorities. The investigation revealed links between the criminal network and similar organizations in other countries in the region. Similar clubs operated in Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain, using similar methods to recruit and hold victims. The total number of victims across the region may reach several hundred people. Documents from al-Hazrani's office contained plans to expand operations to Southeast Asia and Africa. The criminals explored opportunities to create new channels for supplying victims from the Philippines, Thailand, Kenya, and Nigeria. Particular attention was paid to regions with high levels of poverty and corruption. The clubs were equipped with state-of-the-art video recording and broadcasting equipment. Part of the show was broadcast in real time for customers who could not attend in person. The cost of viewing online was $10,000 per session, which brought the organizers additional income. Club customers received special catalogs with photos and descriptions of available victims. Each girl had a code name and a detailed file indicating her physical characteristics, nationality, and special skills. Customers could order individual sessions or participate in group events. The club's security system provided multi-level protection against possible information leaks. All participants signed non-disclosure agreements under threat of financial sanctions and physical violence. Clients underwent thorough background and financial checks before being admitted to events. Communication between network participants was carried out via encrypted messengers and closed forums on the darknet. Multi-level encryption and traffic anonymization systems were used, making it difficult for law enforcement agencies to track correspondence. Servers were located in jurisdictions with favorable legislation. Faisal al-Hazrani left the United Arab Emirates on a private jet 9 hours after the police raid on the Al Fatan Tower began. The plane took off from a private terminal at Dubai International Airport, bound for Riyadh, without filing an official flight plan. Air traffic control recorded the takeoff at 3:20 a.m. on April 4th, when investigators were just beginning to examine the burned-out premises of the club. Attempts to arrest the main organizer of the criminal network were unsuccessful due to his diplomatic status and influential connections in Saudi Arabia's ruling circles. Al-Hazrani held the position of advisor to the kingdom's Ministry of Culture and Sports, which gave him certain privileges when crossing borders. His passport contained special marks exempting him from standard inspection procedures. The Saudi authorities officially denied al-Hazrani's involvement in criminal activity, citing a lack of sufficient evidence. According to them, the charges against him are based on the testimony of unscrupulous witnesses and may be motivated by a desire to obtain compensation from the wealthy businessman. Requests for the suspect's extradition were rejected on the grounds of protecting the sovereignty of the state. Interpol has added Faisal al-Hazrani to its wanted persons database, but the search for him is complicated by the fact that he has several passports from different countries. In addition to Saudi citizenship, he has residency in Switzerland, an investment visa for Cyprus, and a diplomatic passport from one of the African countries. This allows him to move freely around the world, avoiding arrest. The assets of the Young Artists Support Fund were frozen in several jurisdictions, but most of the funds were transferred to offshore bank accounts before the investigation began. Investigators have established that al-Hazrani controlled accounts with a total balance of more than $80 million in Swiss banks alone. This money was placed in the names of front men and trust funds. The United Arab Emirates authorities officially stated that they did not have sufficient evidence to bring charges against the members of the criminal network. According to their version, the video recordings from the club could have been edited using deepfake technology, and the witness statements are not corroborated by objective data. They emphasized that Maria Vinogradova entered the country voluntarily on a tourist visa. The official position of the Emirati authorities has drawn sharp criticism from international human rights organizations. UN human rights representatives have demanded an independent investigation, and that all those involved be held accountable. The European Parliament has passed a resolution condemning human trafficking in the region and calling for economic sanctions against the UAE. Russian diplomats repeatedly appealed to the UAE authorities to provide full information about the circumstances of Maria Vinogradova's death. Consular officials were granted permission to meet with local investigators, but were denied access to the case files. The Emirati side cited the need to maintain the confidentiality of the investigation. The Vinogradov family appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, complaining about the inaction of the UAE authorities in investigating their daughter's murder. The applicants are demanding recognition of the violation of the right to life, the prohibition of torture, and the right to an effective investigation. The case may take several years to consider due to the complexity of international jurisdiction. German authorities sentenced Markus Schmidt to 8 years in prison for complicity in human trafficking and sexual coercion. The court found him guilty of financing criminal activities and receiving sexual services from victims of human trafficking. The sentence was the first real punishment for a member of an international network. Other clients of the club avoided criminal prosecution thanks to their influential connections and the lack of cooperation between law enforcement agencies in different countries. Several businessmen from the Persian Gulf countries voluntarily paid large sums to the victims' families in exchange for waiving their claims. Officially, these payments were recorded as charitable donations. Russian investigators are continuing their work on the human trafficking criminal case, but their options are limited by the UAE's refusal to provide the necessary materials. Over the 4 years of the investigation, the identities of several organizers and intermediaries have been established, but none of them have been brought to justice. The case is currently at the stage of an international search for suspects. Elena Vinogradova established a charitable foundation named after her daughter to help the families of human trafficking victims. The organization searches for missing girls, provides legal support to their relatives, and conducts information campaigns on the methods used by criminals to recruit victims. During its work, the foundation has helped locate 23 missing girls. Maria's mother regularly appears in the media, talking about her daughter's fate and demanding a fair investigation. Her posts on social media have received thousands of reposts and comments of support. Several journalistic investigations based on her materials have received international awards for highlighting the problem of human trafficking. Law enforcement agencies from several countries have set up a joint working group to combat international human trafficking in the Middle East. It includes representatives from Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France. The group exchanges information about suspicious activities of modeling agencies and coordinates operations to crack down on crimes. An analysis of modern recruitment methods shows that criminal schemes are becoming more technologically advanced. Organizers are increasingly using artificial intelligence to create fake profiles on social networks and automate the process of searching for potential victims. This makes it difficult to detect criminal activity using traditional methods. Social networks have begun to implement special algorithms to detect suspicious activity related to human trafficking. The systems analyze user behavior patterns, message content, and financial flows to identify potential criminals. However, the effectiveness of these measures remains limited due to the constant improvement of camouflage methods. International organizations are calling for tighter control over the activities of modeling agencies and talent agencies, especially those offering work abroad. It is proposed to create a single register of licensed agencies and mandatory verification of their activities by regulatory authorities. However, the implementation of these measures is facing resistance from the industry. The case of Maria Vinogradova has become a symbol of the impunity of human traffickers and the ineffectiveness of international justice. Her story is used in educational programs for young people as a warning about the risks associated with tempting offers of work abroad. Law enforcement agencies urge caution when dealing with unknown agencies. 4 years later, justice for Maria Vinogradova and other victims of the criminal network has still not been served. Faisal al-Hazrani continues to live a life of luxury under the protection of influential patrons, and most of his accomplices remain at large. The case has become a striking example of how money and connections can allow people to avoid responsibility for the most serious crimes against humanity.